The bitter November wind howled through the city streets, cutting through layers of clothing and piercing to the bone. Michael sat on a weathered wooden bench in a park near downtown, clutching a cardboard sign that read, "Homeless Veteran. Hungary. Anything helps." His fingers, red and stiff from the cold, trembled as he held the sign close to his chest. Around him, people bustled by, bundled in heavy coats and scarves, their faces buried in their phones or turned deliberately away. Today was Veterans Day. The irony was not lost on Michael. A day meant to honor people like him, those who had sacrificed everything to serve their country. Yet here he was, invisible to the world. His stomach growled loudly, a painful reminder that he hadn't eaten in 2 days. A few people had tossed him coins earlier, but not nearly enough for a meal. He watched as a family strolled by, the little girl clutching an American flag in one hand and her father's hand in the other. Her bright laughter echoed in the cold air, a sharp contrast to Michael's own grim reality. His gaze dropped to his boots, scuffed, cracked, and far removed from the polished pair he had worn during his time in the Marines. As the minutes dragged on, Michael's thoughts spiraled. How did it come to this? How had the man who once led his squad through hostile territory now become a ghost in his own city? A sharp honk jolted him from his thoughts. Across the street, a sleek Tesla Model X pulled up to the curb. Its futuristic design and pristine white paint gleamed under the weak winter sunlight. Michael barely paid attention at first. Luxury cars were common in this part of town, and they belonged to a world far removed from his own. But then, something unusual happened. The driver's door opened, and out stepped Elon Musk. Michael blinked, certain his eyes were playing tricks on him. He squinted at the figure, instantly recognizable with his sharp features and confident stride. Musk adjusted his coat and glanced around, seemingly searching for someone. Michael's heart pounded. Why was Elon Musk, one of the richest men in the world, here? The billionaire's gaze swept across the park, then landed squarely on Michael. For a moment, the two men locked eyes. Michael's breath caught. He instinctively looked away, embarrassed by his appearance and unsure of what to expect. To his shock, Musk began walking toward him. "Hey," Musk said, his voice calm but direct. "What's your name?" Michael hesitated, unsure if he should respond. He clutched his sign tighter, his mind racing. Was this some sort of cruel prank? "It's Michael," he finally managed, his voice hoarse from disuse. Musk crouched slightly to meet Michael's eye level. "Michael, do you mind if I sit?" Michael nodded numbly, shifting to make space on the bench. Musk lowered himself onto the worn wood, looking completely out of place yet strangely comfortable. "I saw your sign," Musk began, his tone serious but kind. "You're a veteran?" Michael nodded again. "Yes, sir. Marine Corps." Musk's expression softened. "Thank you for your service." He paused, as if weighing his next words carefully. "I know this might sound strange, but how would you like a chance to turn things around?" Michael stared at him, unsure how to respond. Was this real, or just another empty promise? Before he could say anything, Musk stood up and extended a hand. "Come with me," he said simply. For a moment, Michael didn't move. His mind raced with doubts and questions. Why him? What could someone like Elon Musk possibly want with a homeless man like him? But then, he looked at Musk's outstretched hand. Strong, steady, and unwavering. It wasn't just an offer, it was a lifeline. With a deep breath, Michael reached out and took it. As Michael climbed into the passenger seat of the Tesla, the car's heated interior was a stark contrast to the freezing streets he had just left behind. The warmth seeped into his stiff fingers and aching joints, but his mind was still racing. The hum of the electric engine was nearly silent, leaving an almost eerie quiet as they pulled into traffic. Michael glanced at Elon Musk out of the corner of his eye, still struggling to believe what was happening. He felt like a man who had wandered into someone else's dream. Why was Musk helping him? What could he possibly see in a man who had nothing left? "Relax," Musk said, sensing Michael's tension. "You look like you're expecting me to drop you off at some charity gala." Michael managed a weak chuckle. "I guess I'm still trying to figure out if this is real." Musk gave him a quick glance before focusing back on the road. "It's real, Michael, but I don't hand out pity. I saw something in your eyes back there. You've been through hell, but you're still here. That means something. Michael shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. His mind drifted back to his days in the Marines, a time when he had once been sure of his purpose. The year was 2005. Michael was 22, fresh out of boot camp, and eager to serve his country. He remembered the feel of his first uniform, the crispness of the fabric, the weight of the medals he would one day earn. Back then, he was invincible, or so he thought. His platoon had been his family. They trained together, ate together, and laughed together, even in the most dire circumstances. But nothing could have prepared them for the reality of war. Michael's mind replayed the mission that had changed everything. They were on patrol in a remote village overseas, tasked with securing a high-risk area. The air was tense, the kind of tension that tightened your chest and made every sound seem sharper. Then it happened. A roadside bomb. The explosion was deafening, throwing Michael and his men into chaos. When the dust settled, 3 of his closest friends were gone. The guilt had been unbearable. Michael had been their squad leader, the one responsible for bringing them home safely. He replayed that day in his mind over and over, searching for what he could have done differently. He had survived, but he wasn't the same man who had joined the Marines. "You okay?" Musk's voice snapped Michael back to the present. "Yeah," Michael said, though his voice betrayed him. Musk didn't press him. Instead, he drove in silence for a while, giving Michael the space he needed. After a few moments, Musk spoke again. "You know, I read somewhere that veterans have some of the strongest problem-solving skills. You've been through situations most people can't even imagine. That's not weakness, Michael. That's strength." Michael looked out the window, watching the city lights blur past. He wanted to believe Musk's words, but the weight of his past felt too heavy to carry. When he had returned from deployment, the world had seemed alien. Crowded streets felt suffocating. Fireworks on the 4th of July were no longer a celebration. They were triggers. Michael tried to rebuild his life, but PTSD made even the simplest tasks feel impossible. His wife, Sarah, had done her best to support him, but the cracks in their marriage grew wider with each passing year. Eventually, she had taken their son, Luke, and left. Michael couldn't blame her. He had pushed them away, too ashamed to let them see how far he had fallen. The Tesla came to a smooth stop in front of a modest building with a bright neon sign that read, Hope Haven Shelter. Musk turned to Michael. "This place isn't fancy, but it's a start. They'll give you a hot meal, a bed, and a chance to catch your breath. Tomorrow, we'll talk about what's next." Michael hesitated. He had been to shelters before, and they had always felt like dead ends. But something about Musk's presence, his calm confidence, made Michael want to trust him. As he stepped out of the car, Musk called after him. "One more thing, Michael." Michael turned, his hand on the door. "You don't owe me anything," Musk said, "but you owe yourself another chance. Don't waste it." For the first time in years, Michael felt a flicker of something he thought he had lost forever. Hope. The shelter was a quiet refuge from the chaos of the streets. Inside, Michael was greeted by the warm scent of soup and the sound of muffled conversations. A volunteer, a cheerful older woman named Marge, handed him a tray of food, a bowl of chicken noodle soup, a slice of bread, and a cup of tea. "Eat up, Han," she said with a kind smile. "You look like you need it." Michael muttered a quick thanks, carrying the tray to an empty table in the corner. The warmth of the soup spread through his chest, but it wasn't enough to chase away the memories flooding his mind. He thought of Sarah. She had been his anchor in the early days after he returned from deployment. While Michael struggled to find work and cope with his PTSD, Sarah worked tirelessly to keep their small family afloat. She took extra shifts at the hospital as a nurse, always coming home with a tired smile and words of encouragement. But no matter how hard she tried, Michael couldn't meet her halfway. His nights were plagued by nightmares, flashes of explosions, the screams of his men. He would wake up in a cold sweat, gasping for air, his heart racing like he was still on the battlefield. During the day, the smallest things set him off. A car backfiring, a crowded grocery store, the sight of a young man in uniform. Sarah begged him to seek help, but Michael refused. "I can handle it," he had insisted, though he knew deep down that he couldn't. His refusal to confront his trauma strained their marriage. Arguments became frequent, and Michael's temper flared more often than not. Then there was Luke, their son. Luke was only 7 when Michael returned home, full of excitement to have his dad back. But Michael's mood swings and withdrawn nature confused and hurt the boy. One evening, Luke had asked innocently, "Why don't you smile anymore, Dad?" Michael didn't have an answer. The question had struck a nerve, and instead of comforting his son, he had snapped, yelling at Luke to leave him alone. The look of fear on Luke's face still haunted Michael. The breaking point came 2 years later. It was a Sunday afternoon. Michael had been drinking, something he rarely did but increasingly turned to as a crutch. Sarah had just finished another grueling shift and found him passed out on the couch, an empty beer bottle on the floor and the TV blaring. "Michael, this has to stop," she said, shaking him awake. Her voice trembled, a mix of anger and desperation. He groaned, rubbing his eyes. "Not now, Sarah. I'm tired." "You're always tired," she snapped, her voice rising. "I can't do this anymore. Luke can't live like this. You need help, Michael. Real help." He sat up, his face darkening. "I don't need anyone's help. I'm fine." "No, you're not." Tears streamed down her face. "You're not the man I married. And I can't stand by and watch you destroy yourself. Not with Luke here." Those words cut deeper than any wound he'd ever endured. Sarah packed a bag for her and Luke that night, leaving Michael alone with his anger, his guilt, and his pride. Back in the shelter, Michael pushed the memory away and focused on finishing his soup. The pain of losing Sarah and Luke was a wound that hadn't healed, one he wasn't sure ever would. As he placed his empty tray on the counter, Marge approached him with a soft smile. "Got a place for you in the dorm upstairs," she said. "Clean bed, fresh sheets. It's not much, but it's warm." Michael nodded. "Thank you." Before he headed upstairs, he asked, "Do you have a phone I can use?" Marge pointed to a small phone station near the front desk. "Help yourself, dear." Michael hesitated, staring at the old landline. His hands trembled as he picked it up and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. It rang twice before going to voicemail. The automated message ended with a beep, and Michael's throat tightened. "Hey, Sarah," he began, his voice shaky. It's me. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. For not being the man you needed me to be. I'm trying to change. I don't know if it's too late, but if you could, please tell Luke I love him. That's all. Bye." He hung up quickly, his heart pounding. For a moment, he stood there, staring at the phone, wondering if she would even listen to the message. As he climbed into the dormitory bed that night, Michael thought about Musk's words. "You owe yourself another chance." For the first time in years, he let himself believe it might be true. The faint light of dawn crept through the frost-covered windows of the shelter dormitory. Michael stirred, pulling the thin blanket tighter around him. For the first time in years, he had slept soundly. No nightmares, no sudden jolts awake, just silence. He sat up and glanced around. The dorm was filled with rows of simple metal-framed beds, each occupied by someone who, like him, had fallen through society's cracks. The sounds of quiet breathing and occasional snoring filled the air. Michael swung his legs over the side of the bed and rubbed his face. Today was a new day, and for the first time in a long time, he felt the faintest flicker of purpose. Downstairs in the common room, Marge greeted him with a steaming cup of coffee. "Good morning, sunshine," she said with a warm smile. "Sleep okay?" Michael nodded. "Better than I have in a while. Thanks." She handed him a plate of scrambled eggs and toast. "Eat up. You'll need your strength." "That friend of yours, what's his name?" "The fancy one with the car. He called earlier. Said he'd be here to pick you up soon." Michael froze mid-sip of his coffee. "Elon Musk?" Marge chuckled. "Yeah, him. I almost didn't believe it when he called. Thought it was one of those pranksters trying to be funny." Michael wasn't sure how to respond. He had half expected Musk to forget about him, to chalk their encounter up to a fleeting moment of goodwill. Yet here he was, proving Michael wrong. An hour later, the sleek Tesla pulled up to the shelter. Michael stepped outside, the crisp morning air biting at his skin, and watched as Musk stepped out of the car. "Morning," Musk greeted him, his tone casual. "You look like you slept well." Michael nodded. "I did. Thanks to you." Musk gestured toward the passenger seat. "Hop in. We've got work to do." As the Tesla hummed quietly down the street, Michael finally worked up the courage to ask, "Why are you helping me? I mean, I'm just nobody." Musk glanced at him briefly before turning back to the road. "You're not nobody, Michael. You served your country. You've been through things most people can't even imagine. That kind of strength, that kind of resilience, it's rare. And honestly, I like a good underdog story." Michael wasn't sure how to respond. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his fingers picking at a loose thread on his jacket. "Look," Musk continued, his voice calm but firm, "I'm not saying this is going to be easy. Turning your life around is hard work. But I can open doors for you. Opportunities most people would kill for. The rest is up to you." Michael nodded slowly. "I'm willing to try." "Good," Musk said. "Because today, we're going to start building something. Literally." The Tesla pulled into the parking lot of a sprawling warehouse on the outskirts of town. The building bore the logo of one of Musk's companies, the Boring Company. Inside, the space buzzed with activity. Workers in bright safety vests moved about, operating machinery and assembling components. The air smelled of metal and grease, and the hum of equipment filled the cavernous space. Musk led Michael through the maze of activity, explaining as they went, "This is one of our projects, creating underground transportation systems to alleviate traffic congestion in major cities. It's a lot of hard work, but it's meaningful, and I think it could be a good fit for you." Michael looked around, his nerves kicking in. "I don't know anything about this kind of work," he admitted. "You don't have to," Musk replied. "We'll train you. All I need from you is commitment. Show up every day, work hard, and don't give up when things get tough." Michael hesitated. He hadn't held a steady job in years. The idea of stepping into a structured environment again was both exhilarating and terrifying. As if sensing his hesitation, Musk added, "Think of this as your new mission, Michael. A chance to rebuild, one step at a time." Michael spent the rest of the day shadowing a team of workers, learning the basics of the job. By lunchtime, his muscles ached from lifting heavy materials, and his hands were covered in grime. Yet, for the first time in years, he felt productive. At one point, a young worker named Eddie struck up a conversation. "You're new, huh?" Eddie asked, wiping sweat from his brow. "Yeah," Michael replied. "First day." Eddie grinned. "Don't worry. You'll get the hang of it. Just stick with it." Michael nodded, grateful for the encouragement. As the day came to an end, Musk found Michael near the exit. "How'd it go?" "Tiring," Michael admitted. "But good. It felt good to do something." Musk smiled. "That's the idea. Keep showing up, and you'll be surprised at what you can accomplish." As Michael climbed back into the Tesla, he felt a glimmer of something he hadn't experienced in years: pride. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was beginning to rebuild. That evening, after another quiet dinner at the shelter, Michael sat in the small common room. The hum of a TV in the background played a local news segment, but he barely noticed. His mind was a storm of conflicting emotions. Hope clashed with doubt, progress with self-loathing. He'd spent the day working harder than he had in years, but beneath the sweat and grime, the guilt still lingered. His failures, his losses, they were like ghosts, always there, no matter how much he tried to bury them. Marge noticed him sitting alone and brought over a cup of chamomile tea. "You look like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders, Han," she said softly. Michael managed a small smile. "Something like that." "Want to talk about it?" she offered, settling into the chair across from him. Michael hesitated. He had spent years keeping his pain bottled up, but something about Marge's calm, non-judgmental demeanor made him feel safe. I keep thinking about my son," he began. His voice cracked slightly. "Luke. He's 11 now. I haven't seen him in years." Marge nodded, her expression sympathetic but patient. "I messed up," Michael continued. "I pushed him and his mom away. I was so caught up in my own pain that I couldn't see what I was doing to them. Now, I don't even know if they'd want to see me again." Marge took a sip of her tea before speaking. You know, it's never too late to try to make things right. Kids are resilient, Michael. And if there's one thing they want more than anything, it's to know their parents love them. Michael stared into his cup. I told him I loved him in a voicemail today. But what if it's not enough? What if I've done too much damage? Marge reached out and placed a hand on his. That's not for you to decide, hon. What matters is that you're trying now. And trust me, that means more than you think. Later that night, lying in bed, Michael couldn't sleep. His conversation with Marge had stirred something in him, a longing, not just for reconciliation, but for redemption. He pulled out the battered wallet he carried everywhere and opened it to the one photo he had left of Sarah and Luke. It was taken on a sunny day in a park. Luke, then just a toddler, sat on his shoulders, giggling, while Sarah laughed beside them. They looked so happy, so carefree. Tears blurred his vision as he whispered, "I'm sorry, buddy. I'll make it right. I promise." The next morning, Michael woke with a renewed sense of determination. After breakfast, he headed outside, where Elon Musk's Tesla was waiting for him once again. "You ready?" Musk asked as Michael slid into the passenger seat. "As ready as I'll ever be," Michael replied. The day at the Boring Company was just as grueling as the first. Michael worked alongside Eddie and the rest of the team, hauling materials, assembling components, and learning the ropes. At one point, Eddie pulled him aside. "Hey, man, I was wondering, what's your story? You seem like you've been through some stuff." Michael hesitated. He wasn't used to opening up, especially to strangers. But something about Eddie's genuine curiosity put him at ease. "I'm a veteran," he said simply. "Came back from deployment a long time ago, but I guess part of me never really came back." Eddie nodded, his expression serious. "My dad's a vet," he said. "I know it's not easy, but you're here now, man. That says a lot." Michael offered a faint smile. "Thanks." That evening, Musk invited Michael to dinner. They sat in a quiet corner of a downtown restaurant, the contrast between Musk's sharp suit and Michael's worn-out jacket stark but unspoken. Over a plate of steak and potatoes, Musk leaned forward. "You've been doing well, Michael. I've talked to your supervisor. They're impressed." Michael shrugged. "I'm just doing my best, trying to stay out of my own way." Musk studied him for a moment before speaking. "What's holding you back?" Michael looked down at his plate, his appetite fading. "I've got a lot of baggage. Things I've done. People I've let down." Musk nodded thoughtfully. "Everyone has baggage. The question is, what are you going to do with it? Let it weigh you down, or use it to build something new?" Michael didn't respond right away. Instead, he thought about the message he'd left for Sarah. About Luke. About the man he wanted to become. "I don't know if I can fix everything," he admitted. "Maybe not," Musk said. "But you can start. And sometimes, starting is the hardest part." That night, back at the shelter, Michael sat at the same phone he'd used the day before. He stared at the keypad, his fingers trembling slightly. This time, he dialed a different number. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. "Hello?" Michael's breath caught in his throat. It was Sarah. "It's me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, she spoke. "Michael." Her tone was cautious, guarded. I wanted to say I'm sorry," he began. "For everything. I know I can't undo the past, but I'm trying to change. I want to be better. For you. For Luke." Another pause. When Sarah spoke again, her voice softened. "It's been a long time, Michael." "I know," he said, "but I'm not giving up this time. I just need a chance to prove it." Sarah didn't respond right away, but Michael could hear the faint sound of her breathing. "Let me think about it," she said finally. "I'll call you back." "Thank you," Michael said, his voice trembling with relief. As he hung up the phone, he felt a small but powerful shift inside him. For the first time, the walls he had built around himself began to crack. He didn't know what the future held, but he was willing to fight for it, one step at a time. The days that followed were a test of Michael's resolve. Each morning, he woke early, reported to work at the Boring Company, and pushed himself harder than the day before. Every ache in his muscles, every bead of sweat felt like a small payment toward a future he could barely envision. a life of stability, purpose, and maybe even forgiveness. At the end of each day, he would return to the shelter, often exhausted but filled with a growing sense of accomplishment. The promise of a second chance with Sarah and Luke lingered in his mind, driving him forward. One evening, after another grueling shift, Michael found himself standing in front of the shelter's payphone. The number he had called a few nights earlier was burned into his memory. He hadn't heard back from Sarah yet, and the silence gnawed at him. Eddie, his coworker, had given him some advice earlier that day. "Man, if you want to fix things, you gotta be patient," Eddie had said. "People don't just forget the past overnight. You gotta show them you've changed, not just tell them." Taking Eddie's words to heart, Michael decided not to call Sarah again. At least not yet. Instead, he pulled out a notebook he had picked up from the shelter's resource center. Sitting at one of the shelter's worn wooden tables, Michael began to write. "Dear Sarah, I know this letter won't fix everything. Words are easy to say, and I've probably said too many that I didn't follow through on. But I want you to know that I'm trying. Really trying. I've started working again. It's tough, but it feels good to be doing something worthwhile. Elon Musk, that Elon Musk, helped me get the job. I know that probably sounds crazy, but it's true. He gave me a chance when no one else would. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I don't expect it, but I want to earn back your trust, and more importantly, Luke's. I'm not the man I was back then. At least, I don't want to be. If you're willing, I'd love to see Luke, even if it's just for a few minutes. I want him to know that I'm here and I care. Take all the time you need. I'll wait. Thank you for reading this. Sincerely, Michael." He stared at the words for a long time, wondering if they would ever be enough. Finally, he folded the letter carefully and placed it in an envelope. The next morning, on his way to work, he stopped by a post office and mailed it. At work, Michael continued to make progress. Each day brought new challenges, but he found himself adapting quickly. His supervisors noticed his effort, often nodding in approval or offering words of encouragement. Eddie remained a constant source of support, cracking jokes when the work got too intense and sharing bits of advice when Michael felt unsure. "Man, you're like a different person from when you started," Eddie said one afternoon as they took a break. "Feels like it," Michael admitted, "but I still have a long way to go. Don't we all?" Eddie replied with a grin. A week passed without any word from Sarah. Michael busied himself with work, trying not to dwell on the uncertainty. But each evening, as he sat alone in his corner of the shelter, the weight of the unknown pressed down on him. One night, Marge approached him with a smile. "You've been quiet lately. Everything okay?" Michael hesitated before nodding, just waiting for something that might not come. Marge's eyes softened. "Sometimes good things take time. But you're doing all the right things, Michael. Keep going. You're stronger than you think." 2 weeks after he sent the letter, Michael returned to the shelter after work to find Marge waiting for him at the front desk. She was holding a slip of paper with a number scrawled on it. "This came for you," she said, handing it to him. Michael stared at the paper, his heart pounding. The handwriting was unmistakably Sarah's. "She called," Marge continued. "Said you can call her back. Sounds like she's ready to talk." Michael clutched the paper tightly, his breath catching in his throat. "Thanks, Marge," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. That evening, Michael sat at the payphone, the slip of paper trembling in his hand. He stared at the numbers, his mind racing. What would he say? What if she changed her mind? Finally, he took a deep breath and dialed. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then, Sarah's voice came through the line. "Hello?" Michael swallowed hard. "Hey, Sarah. It's me." Her pause was shorter this time, her tone softer. "Hi, Michael. I got your message," he said. "Thank you for calling me back." "I read your letter," she replied. It meant a lot." Michael exhaled slowly, relief washing over him. "I meant every word of it." "I know," Sarah said, "and I can see that you're trying. I'm not ready to make any big decisions yet, but maybe we could start small. Coffee, or something. Just to talk." Michael's heart leapt. "I'd like that. Whenever you're ready." "I'll let you know," she said. "And Michael, thank you for reaching out." As the call ended, Michael leaned back in his chair, a faint smile spreading across his face. It was just a small step, but it was more than he had dared to hope for. And for the first time in years, he felt the fragile beginnings of something he thought he'd lost forever. Hope. Michael woke the next morning with a lightness in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. Sarah's call was still fresh in his mind, her voice a comforting echo that reminded him of everything he'd once had and still longed for. While nothing was guaranteed, the fact that she was willing to meet him, even for something as simple as coffee, was more than he had dared to dream. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror at the shelter, carefully shaving the stubble off his face. The man staring back at him looked different from the one he remembered just weeks ago. His eyes, while still shadowed by years of hardship, now carried a flicker of determination. At work, Michael poured his energy into the day's tasks. Eddie, as usual, kept things lively. "You've got a spring in your step today," Eddie teased during their lunch break. "What's up? Win the lottery?" "Not quite," Michael replied with a small grin. "Let's just say, things are starting to look up." "Good for you, man," Eddie said, raising his sandwich in a mock toast. "Whatever it is, you deserve it." As the day wore on, Michael's supervisors continued to notice his efforts. Musk, who occasionally stopped by to check on the crew, seemed particularly pleased. "You're making real progress, Michael," Musk said, clapping him on the shoulder during a break. "Keep this up, and there might be something bigger for you here." "Thank you," Michael said earnestly. "I won't let you down." Musk smiled. "I don't think you will." That evening, Michael returned to the shelter and found a quiet corner to sit and think. Sarah had promised to let him know when she was ready to meet, but the anticipation was already building. He knew he needed to be prepared, not just physically, but emotionally. Marge, as always, seemed to sense his mood. She sat down across from him with a cup of tea. "You're thinking about her, aren't you?" she asked gently. Michael nodded. "I don't want to mess this up, Marge. It might be my only chance." Marge smiled. "The fact that you're worried about it means you're on the right track. Just be honest, Michael. Be yourself." "That's what she needs to see." Michael nodded, though his nerves remained. Over the next few days, Michael focused on small improvements. He picked up a second-hand jacket and a clean pair of shoes from the shelter's donation room. He practiced what he might say to Sarah, though each time he did, his words felt clumsy and inadequate. Finally, one evening, he received a text. "Sarah, let's meet this Saturday, 10 a.m. at Maggie's Diner." Michael stared at the message, his heart racing. Maggie's Diner. It had been their favorite spot when they were still a family. The thought of returning there brought a wave of nostalgia, mixed with a deep, aching sadness. When Saturday morning arrived, Michael woke before dawn. He took extra care getting ready, making sure his clothes were clean and his appearance presentable. By the time he arrived at Maggie's Diner, he was 20 minutes early. The familiar smell of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon hit him as he stepped inside. The place hadn't changed much over the years. Red vinyl booths lined the walls, and the faint hum of a jukebox played softly in the background. Michael chose a booth near the window and sat with his hands folded, his nerves tightening with each passing minute. At exactly 10 a.m., the bell above the door jingled, and there she was. Sarah. She looked almost the same as he remembered. Her auburn hair tied back, her posture both strong and graceful. But there was something different about her eyes, a guardedness that hadn't been there before. "Michael," she said as she approached the table. "Hi, Sarah," he replied, standing awkwardly before she motioned for him to sit. They ordered coffee and sat in silence for a moment, the air between them heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Sarah broke the silence. "You look better. Healthier." "Thanks," Michael said. "I've been working, trying to get my life back together." Sarah nodded, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup. "I read your letter. I can see you're trying, Michael. But it's hard to forget everything that happened." "I know," Michael said, his voice low. "I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. I wanted you to know that I'm not the same person I was back then. I'm working on myself. For you. For Luke." At the mention of Luke, Sarah's expression softened slightly. "He asks about you sometimes," she admitted. "Not often, but enough. He's been hurt, Michael." I've tried to protect him, but, she trailed off, her voice tinged with emotion. Michael felt a lump in his throat. I never meant to hurt him. Or you. I was just lost. But I'm trying to find my way back. I want to be there for him, Sarah, if you'll let me. Sarah studied him for a long moment, as if searching for something in his face. I don't know if I'm ready for that yet, she said finally. But maybe we can start with you writing to him. He loves getting mail. It might help him understand that you're serious about this. Michael's chest tightened with emotion. I'd like that. Thank you. As they finished their coffee and prepared to leave, Sarah looked at him with a hint of a smile. This doesn't mean everything is fixed, she said. But it's a start. Michael nodded. That's all I need. As he watched her walk out the door, he felt a sense of cautious optimism. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a beginning. And for the first time in years, Michael believed that maybe, just maybe, he could rebuild what he had lost. The following days were filled with anticipation and quiet determination. Michael spent his evenings writing. Every word he crafted for Luke felt like a small step toward mending the wounds of the past, a tiny thread he hoped would help rebuild the connection he once had with his son. It wasn't easy. The words never felt quite right, and his mind often wandered back to the painful memories of the time he'd lost. But each time, he reminded himself that this was part of the process. One night, after a long shift at work, Michael sat at his usual table at the shelter. He was exhausted, but he couldn't let it go. With a pen in hand and a piece of paper in front of him, he began to write. Dear Luke, it's been a long time, hasn't it? I'm sorry for all the time I missed. I can't change that, but I want you to know I'm trying. I'm working hard to become the man I should have been all along. I remember when you were just a little boy, how you'd run around the yard with your toy cars, pretending to be a race car driver. You were so full of energy, always laughing, always asking questions. I'm sorry I wasn't there to watch you grow. I know I can't just show up and make everything better. I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for a chance to prove that I'm here now, that I care. I hope one day we can talk face to face. But until then, I just wanted you to know that I'm thinking of you. Every day. Love. Dad. The letter felt right. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Michael sealed it in an envelope, taking extra care to write Luke's name on it, before dropping it in the outgoing mail slot at the shelter. His heart pounded as he watched the envelope disappear into the chute. He had no idea what Luke's reaction would be, or if Sarah would even let him read it. But he had to try. The next few days brought a series of small victories. Michael continued to work hard at the boring company, earning respect from his co-workers and supervisors. He had even received an unexpected compliment from Elon Musk himself, who acknowledged his dedication and focus. But despite the progress, a cloud of doubt hung over Michael. The fear that Sarah might never allow him to have a place in Luke's life, that his efforts might be in vain, was a constant weight on his shoulders. One evening, as Michael prepared for another day at work, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah. Sarah, Luke got your letter. He said it made him happy, but he's confused. He doesn't know if he can trust you yet. I don't know if I can either, but he's willing to hear more. Let's take this one step at a time. A wave of relief washed over Michael. Luke had read his letter. That was progress. But the uncertainty in Sarah's words reminded him that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Trust had to be rebuilt, piece by piece. A few days later, Michael arrived at work to find an email from the HR department. It was an invitation for an official performance review. Congratulations, Eddie said when he noticed Michael's reaction. This is it, man. You've been working your tail off, and now they're recognizing you. Michael nodded, his mind swirling. A performance review meant a chance to move up, a chance to make his position at the boring company permanent. But it also meant more pressure, more responsibility. And with that, he felt the growing weight of wanting to prove to Sarah and Luke that he could be the man they needed. That evening, as he sat in his cramped room at the shelter, Michael practiced what he might say. The thought of taking on more responsibility at work, on top of everything else, felt daunting. But this was a critical moment. He had to make the most of it. The next day, Michael walked into the small office where his performance review would take place. Sitting across from him was his supervisor, Tom, a no-nonsense kind of guy who had watched Michael's growth from day one. You've been doing solid work, Michael, Tom said, flipping through his notes. I've seen you take initiative, and that's exactly what we need around here. Michael nodded, his hands clenched slightly, but he kept his focus. Tom looked up from the papers. You've got potential, Michael. If you keep this up, I think we can move you into a more permanent role. There are a lot of opportunities here, and I'm confident you can handle them. Michael felt a rush of gratitude and disbelief. This was it. This was his chance to not only turn his life around, but to prove to Sarah and Luke that he wasn't just talking, he was doing. Later that day, after finishing his shift, Michael sat alone in the small break room. His phone buzzed again, and he saw another message from Sarah. Sarah, Luke wants to know if you're willing to keep writing to him. He's not sure what it means, but he likes hearing from you. He says he'll think about it. I'll let you know if he has more questions. Michael's heart swelled with hope, tempered by the understanding that this was still a slow process. It was a start, but it wasn't the end. He sat back, closing his eyes for a moment. He had been given a second chance, at work, at life, and with his family. It wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time in years, Michael felt like he was on the right path. Whatever came next, he was ready. Days turned into weeks, and Michael continued to press forward, determined to maintain his steady progress. Each morning, he woke up early and walked through the shelter's crowded halls, heading out to meet the day with renewed purpose. His job at the boring company was still going well. He was getting praise for his work ethic, and more responsibility was being offered. He even started to feel a little more confident in his abilities. But no matter how much he succeeded at work, something was missing. Sarah had kept her word and allowed Luke to continue receiving Michael's letters. They weren't long or grand, just simple words, stories about his day, questions about Luke's interests, memories from when they were a family. Each letter was a small step toward rebuilding trust, but Michael often wondered if it was enough. Was this how they would connect again? Through letters? One evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, Michael sat down at the shelter with a piece of paper and a pen. As he wrote, he thought about how little he really knew about his son now. What did Luke like? What made him laugh? What did he need from his father? Dear Luke, I've been thinking a lot about you lately. I remember how you used to build those little Lego castles. You'd get so lost in them, and I'd watch as you tried to make them bigger and better each time. I'm sure you've grown since then, and maybe your interests have changed. I'd love to hear about what you've been up to. What's your favorite thing to do now? Maybe you still like building things? I just wanted you to know I'm still here. Every day. Working hard. I think about you. Always. Love. Dad. Michael sealed the letter with his usual care, making sure it was ready for the next day's mail. But as he placed it in the envelope, a sinking feeling settled in his chest. What if it didn't matter? What if these letters, these efforts, were too little, too late? His mind kept circling back to the uncertainty of his relationship with Sarah and Luke. They were still just words on paper, and he wasn't sure they would ever amount to more than that. A few days later, Michael found himself walking through the parking lot after work when he noticed someone familiar standing by a black Tesla. It was Elon Musk. Musk had been at the company's headquarters that afternoon, overseeing some projects, and Michael had barely noticed him. But now, as he approached the lot, their eyes met. "Hey, Michael," Musk called out, his voice warm. "Mr. Musk," Michael replied, surprised. He had never spoken to him outside of work, and certainly never in this casual setting. Musk smiled and walked toward him. "I've been watching your progress," he said. "You're doing great work, man." Michael was taken aback. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot to me. You've been putting in a lot of effort, and it's paying off," Musk continued. "You've got a good head on your shoulders. I can see a lot of potential in you." Michael felt a surge of pride, but it was also mixed with a nagging feeling of doubt. What did potential mean if he couldn't fix things with his family? "I appreciate that," Michael said, trying to mask the weight on his mind. "I'm just trying to do my best." "Well, you're doing more than that," Musk replied, his tone light and encouraging. "Keep it up, and you'll go far. You've got something that a lot of people don't." Michael tilted his head slightly, unsure if he understood. Musk gave a small chuckle. "You've got heart. Don't forget that." Michael smiled, still processing the words. It was rare for people to give him compliments, especially someone like Elon Musk. As Musk turned to leave, he paused for a moment and added, "You know, if you ever need anything, advice, opportunities, or just someone to talk to, don't hesitate to reach out." Michael stood there, stunned. "Thanks," he said, barely able to believe what he'd just heard. That evening, after the unexpected encounter with Musk, Michael found himself walking through the streets of the city, his thoughts tumbling over each other. What was he doing? What was his real goal here? Was it to climb the ranks at the Boring Company? Was it to get a second chance with Sarah and Luke? For the first time in a long while, he realized something. He didn't just want to prove himself at work. He wanted to prove himself to his family, to make up for the years he had lost. He wanted to show them that he was more than the man who had walked away. When he returned to the shelter, he sat at the small desk and stared at the envelope with Luke's name written on it. The letter he had written earlier that day seemed so small in comparison to everything he wanted to say. Later that night, as he settled into bed, he thought about what Musk had said, "You've got heart." Michael wasn't entirely sure what that meant, but something about the words felt right. He had been through so much heartache, loss, and pain. And yet, he was still here, still trying, still fighting. That heart, the one that had driven him to survive the streets and find work, to reconnect with his son, to repair his broken family. Maybe that was the real measure of his worth. As he drifted off to sleep, Michael knew that he had come a long way. And though the path ahead was uncertain, he was more determined than ever to keep moving forward. He was going to keep trying, no matter how long it took. The next day, Michael received another message from Sarah. It was short, but it carried weight. "Sarah, Luke wants to know if you're still working on your project at the company. He's curious." Michael's heart raced. Luke was curious. About him. About his work. About his life. This was progress, real progress. He quickly typed a reply. "Michael, yes, I'm still working hard. I'm building something important, and I can't wait to tell you all about it when we talk again." That night, as Michael prepared for another day at work, he couldn't help but smile. The road to redemption was still long, but now, for the first time, he felt like he wasn't walking alone. He had a purpose, a reason to keep going. And maybe, just maybe, he was on the brink of getting back the family he had lost. The weeks following Michael's small but significant progress felt like a mix of hope and uncertainty. Every day he woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. He worked hard at the Boring Company, pushed himself to make small improvements in his personal life, and continued writing letters to Luke. But as each day passed, the burden of wanting to prove himself to his son and to Sarah became heavier. The new job, the recognition from Elon Musk, and the progress at work had certainly been encouraging. Yet, every time Michael thought about the possibility of reconnecting with his family, a wave of doubt swept over him. Would it be enough? Would the walls built from years of silence and pain ever come down? One afternoon, Michael stood outside the shelter, taking a short break after his shift. The air was crisp, and the hum of the city around him seemed far away. He had just finished a grueling week at work, and his mind kept drifting back to the one thing that always seemed to occupy his thoughts, Luke. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Michael took it out quickly, hoping it was another message from Sarah. "Sarah, Luke wants to visit you. He says he's ready to talk more." Michael's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for, the moment he had hoped for but never fully believed would come. After all the letters, all the slow, steady progress, Luke was ready. Ready to see his father again. He stared at the message for a long time, reading the words over and over. "Are you sure?" Michael texted back, his fingers trembling. "This is a big step, Sarah." "Sarah, he said he wants to know who you are now. He wants to see if you've really changed." The answer was simple, but it filled him with a flood of emotions. Luke wanted to know if Michael had truly changed. It wasn't just about being a father. It was about proving that he had grown, that the man he had been all those years ago was no longer the man who stood before them now. Michael felt a surge of determination. He wasn't just going to meet Luke as the same man he had been. No, he was going to show him that he was different, that he had worked hard to rebuild his life, that he could be a father worth trusting. The next day, Michael spent hours getting ready. He showered, shaved, and put on his best clothes, an outfit that felt a little out of place but also like a small victory. He hadn't worn anything so nice in a long time, and the simple act of dressing up felt like an important ritual. He arrived early at the cafe where they had agreed to meet. It was a small, quiet place in the heart of the city, far from the noise of the shelter or his usual routine. Michael stood at the entrance, nervously looking around. He hadn't seen Luke in so long, and he had no idea what to expect. Would Luke be angry? Would he be scared? Would he even recognize Michael as the father he once knew? Finally, Michael saw Sarah walking toward him, with Luke right beside her. His son, now a young teenager, looked so much older than Michael had imagined. He was taller, his face a little more grown up, but there was no mistaking those familiar eyes, the eyes Michael had once seen every day. Sarah gave him a brief, almost unreadable look before sitting down at a table. Luke hesitated for a moment, then slowly slid into the seat across from his father. The silence between them was heavy, like the weight of all the years they had lost. Michael's throat tightened. He wanted to say so many things, but the words didn't come. Luke, however, broke the silence. "You're different," he said quietly, staring at Michael. His voice was soft, but there was no mistaking the curiosity in his eyes. Michael nodded, fighting back tears. "I know I am, and I know it's hard to believe, but I've been trying. I've been trying to be the father you deserve." Luke didn't respond immediately. Instead, he glanced over at Sarah, who nodded slightly, encouraging him to continue. "I don't know if I can trust you yet," Luke finally said, "but I'm willing to hear you out. I want to know more about you." Michael felt a lump in his throat. He had expected it, but hearing the words still stung. This wasn't going to be easy, but it was a start, a real start. "I can't promise that everything will be perfect," Michael said, "but I'll keep showing up. I'll keep doing the work. I'm here for you, no matter what." For the next hour, they talked, slowly, carefully, as if testing the waters. Michael shared stories of his life, of the changes he had made, of the work he was doing at the Boring Company. He spoke about how he was trying to build something new, not just for himself but for his family, for Luke. Luke listened, asking questions here and there. He didn't smile much, but Michael could see the wheels turning in his son's mind. He was processing everything. It was a good sign. Finally, as the conversation began to wind down, Luke stood up. "Thanks for meeting with me," he said, his voice still soft but a little warmer than before. "I'll think about what you said." Michael stood up too, his heart swelling with a mixture of relief and pride. This wasn't the end, not by a long shot, but it was a significant moment. As Luke and Sarah walked out of the cafe, Michael felt a strange sense of peace wash over him. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was on the right path. Later that evening, Michael sat down at his desk in the shelter. He took out a fresh piece of paper and began writing to Luke again. "Dear Luke, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for giving me a chance to talk to you today. I know it's not easy, and I'm not asking for anything, but I hope we can keep talking. I don't expect everything to change overnight, but I do believe we're on the right path. I'll be here whenever you're ready to talk more. Love, Dad." He sealed the letter, his hands steady now. This was just the beginning, but Michael knew something had shifted today. There was a chance, an actual chance, that they could rebuild their relationship, and that thought, more than anything else, gave him hope. The weeks following that reunion with Luke were filled with a mix of small victories and moments of uncertainty. Michael couldn't help but replay every detail of their conversation in his head, analyzing his words, his son's responses, and what they had left unsaid. It was clear that Luke had his walls up, but Michael was no stranger to rebuilding. He knew that the road to regaining his son's trust would be slow, but at least there was progress. Despite the steady pace of progress, Michael couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Was he doing enough? Was he showing Luke the real change within him? His work at the Boring Company was going well, and the praise from his colleagues, including Elon Musk, continued to be a source of pride. But it was the family side of things that still weighed heavily on his heart. One evening, Michael sat on his bed in the shelter, his thoughts consumed by the events of the past few weeks. The letter he had written to Luke that morning was still on his desk, waiting to be sent, but something inside him hesitated. Was it too much? Was he overstepping? What if Luke didn't want to hear from him anymore? He needed guidance, someone to tell him what to do. That's when he remembered Elon Musk's offer. The words had stayed with him ever since their conversation by the Tesla in the parking lot. If you ever need anything, advice, opportunities, or just someone to talk to, don't hesitate to reach out. Michael knew this was a long shot, but the thought of reaching out to Musk felt strangely comforting. After all, Musk had been a source of encouragement and validation when Michael needed it most. So, on a whim, he opened his phone and began typing. Dear Mr. Musk, I hope this message finds you well. I know this is probably an unusual request, but I wanted to reach out for some advice. Things have been going well at work, but when it comes to my personal life, especially with my son, Luke, I'm struggling to make real progress. I've been trying to rebuild our relationship, but I'm not sure if I'm doing it the right way. I know I've made a lot of mistakes in the past, and I want to show Luke that I've changed, but it's hard to know what steps to take. Any guidance or advice you might have would mean the world to me. Sincerely, Michael. The following day, Michael was surprised to see a notification on his phone. A message from Elon Musk? His heart skipped a beat as he opened it, unsure of what to expect. Elon Musk? Hey, Michael. Thanks for reaching out. I appreciate your honesty. First of all, you're doing the right thing by showing up. Change takes time, and it's clear that you're putting in the effort. When it comes to rebuilding relationships, it's important to listen more than you speak. It's not about what you say, but how you make the other person feel. Show Luke that you're there for him, and that you respect his pace. Don't rush the process. Let him come to you when he's ready. You've got this. Keep pushing forward. Michael read the message several times, his mind processing every word. The advice was simple, but it struck a chord with him. He had been focused on proving himself to Luke, but maybe what mattered more was showing Luke that he respected his boundaries. He needed to be patient. The relationship they had once shared couldn't be restored overnight, and forcing it would only drive a wedge between them. Armed with this new insight, Michael felt a renewed sense of clarity. He decided to take a step back. Instead of bombarding Luke with letters and messages, he would let the boy take the lead. He would show up when needed, but he wouldn't push. The ball was in Luke's court now, and Michael had to trust that his son would reach out when he was ready. That decision wasn't easy, and there were moments when Michael felt the overwhelming urge to do more, to fix everything right away. But he reminded himself of Musk's advice: listen more than you speak. Let the other person come to you. So, Michael focused on continuing to build his life. He worked diligently at the boring company, and his reputation as a dedicated, hard-working employee continued to grow. Each day felt like a small victory in itself. At the shelter, Michael continued to stay humble, never forgetting the struggles he had been through. He didn't want to lose sight of the lessons he had learned. He didn't want to forget what it felt like to have nothing, to be truly lost. Those experiences had made him who he was today, and they reminded him that he couldn't take anything for granted. One quiet afternoon, as Michael was finishing up a project at work, he received another text from Sarah. Sarah, Luke wants to visit again. He said he's ready to meet with you this weekend. Michael's heart soared. The time had come. He quickly responded, trying to keep his cool. Michael, I'll be there. I'm looking forward to it. This time, there was no hesitation, no second-guessing. Michael was ready. The weekend arrived, and Michael found himself waiting outside the cafe again, this time with a sense of calm that surprised him. This meeting wouldn't be the end of everything, but it felt like another important step in the journey, one that he was willing to take at Luke's pace, no matter how slow it seemed. When Sarah and Luke arrived, Michael stood up to greet them. Luke walked toward him slowly but steadily, his eyes meeting Michael's without the coldness they had shared during their first meeting. There was still a guardedness there, but it was different this time. There was curiosity, too. Michael smiled warmly, his heart full of hope. Hey, Luke, he said softly. Luke nodded and gave a small smile in return. I'm glad you came, Michael added, his voice thick with emotion. They sat down, and for the next hour, they talked about school, about Michael's work, about what Luke had been doing with his friends. It wasn't a deep, soul-searching conversation, but it didn't need to be. This was progress. As they said their goodbyes, Luke paused before leaving. He looked at Michael and said, "Thanks for being here." Michael's chest tightened with emotion, but he simply nodded. "I'll always be here," he said quietly, "whenever you're ready." As Michael walked back to his apartment after the meeting, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. The road ahead was still long, and there were no guarantees. But for the first time in a long time, Michael felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. He was on the right path, and he wasn't alone. He had worked hard to get here, and he was determined to keep moving forward, one step at a time. The days following the meeting with Luke were filled with both anticipation and a deep sense of calm. Michael had realized that the journey to rebuild his relationship with his son would not follow a linear path, but that was okay. What mattered most was that progress was being made, even if it was slower than he had hoped. Each small interaction, every positive step forward, was a victory in itself. Despite his growing hope, Michael couldn't ignore the growing whispers of doubt that still plagued him. The desire to prove himself, to show that he was more than just a man of broken promises and lost opportunities, was still strong. But he was learning that proving himself to Luke wasn't about grand gestures. It was about being consistent, being present, and respecting the process. One evening, as Michael returned to his small apartment after another long day at work, he found an unexpected email waiting for him. It was from Elon Musk. Subject: exciting news. Michael opened the message eagerly. Elon Musk: "Hey Michael, I wanted to let you know that we have a new opportunity at the Boring Company. We're looking for someone with your skills, and I think you'd be a great fit for the team. If you're interested, let's talk about it next week. I'll make sure to clear time in my schedule for you." Michael's heart raced as he read the email. This wasn't just any offer. It was an offer to work on a higher level within the Boring Company. It was the kind of opportunity that could change everything for him. But there was something deeper to consider. Michael knew that this new opportunity, though exciting, was also a huge responsibility. It would mean more time at work, more pressure, and more focus on his career. Would it affect his relationship with Luke? Was he ready to take on more? As much as Michael knew this was a chance he couldn't afford to miss, he also knew that balance was key. He had spent years consumed by his career and neglecting his family. Now that he had a chance to rebuild that relationship, he didn't want to let it slip through his fingers. He took a deep breath and replied to Elon. Subject: exciting news. Michael, thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Musk. I'm honored to be considered for this new role, and I'm very interested. I would love to discuss it further next week. Please let me know when would be a good time to connect. With the email sent, Michael leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He felt proud of how far he had come, and proud of the fact that he was now a part of something much larger than he had ever imagined. But a small part of him wondered how this would affect his personal life. Could he really balance it all? Later that night, Michael sat in the quiet of his apartment, staring out the window at the city lights. He thought about everything he had worked for: his job, his personal growth, and most importantly, his family. He realized that no matter what came next, his family had to be his priority. It wasn't about the career or the money. It was about showing Luke that he could be the father he needed, not just the man he once was. As much as he was looking forward to the new job opportunity, he couldn't forget what had gotten him here. His relationship with Luke. The last few months had been difficult, but they had also been the most rewarding of his life. Reconnecting with his son, even in small steps, was a reminder of what truly mattered. The next day at work, Michael received a call from Sarah. "Hey, Michael, I just wanted to let you know that Luke asked if he could come visit you this weekend again." Michael felt his heart skip a beat. Another opportunity to connect. He had been preparing for this, but there was something different about the way Sarah said it. She was cautious but optimistic, and that gave him hope. "That sounds great," Michael replied, his voice steady. "I'd love to see him. I'll be ready." After the call ended, Michael paused for a moment. He had just received one of the most important career opportunities of his life, and now, on the personal side, he had an opportunity to continue rebuilding his relationship with his son. But there was a balance to find. His new position would require more of his time and energy, and he didn't want to make the same mistakes he had in the past. How could he balance this newfound success at work with his desire to rebuild his family? The weekend came quickly, and Michael found himself standing at the door of the small cafe where he had met Luke before. He checked his watch nervously. He didn't want to seem too eager, but he couldn't help it. Every time Luke agreed to meet him, it felt like another opportunity to prove that he had changed. When Sarah and Luke arrived, Michael greeted them with a warm smile. Luke's face had softened a little since their last meeting, and there was something different in the way he looked at his father. It wasn't the cold distance that had once been there, but a quiet curiosity, as if he was starting to trust that Michael really had changed. "I'm glad you came again, Luke," Michael said, as they sat down. Luke nodded, his eyes meeting his father's. "I've been thinking about what you said last time. You seem different." Michael smiled, his chest swelling with pride. "I'm working on it. I'm trying to be the person you can count on, Luke. And I know it's going to take time, but I'm not going anywhere." Luke seemed to consider this for a moment, then spoke up. "I've been trying to understand what happened with you, and I think I get it now. I'm not sure if I'm ready to trust you completely, but I'm willing to try." Michael's heart leapt. This was more than he had expected, more than he could have hoped for. He knew it wasn't a guarantee, but it was a step forward, an important one. "You don't have to trust me all at once," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I'm here, for however long it takes." As the conversation continued, Michael realized how far they had both come. This wasn't the same relationship that had once been marked by anger and disappointment. This was something new, fragile, but real. There were still many challenges ahead, but they were finally on the right path. By the end of the meeting, Michael and Luke had made plans to meet again the following weekend. It wasn't the grand reunion Michael had once dreamed of, but it was a new beginning. As he walked back to his apartment that evening, Michael felt a sense of contentment settle over him. There were still uncertainties, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was moving in the right direction, both at work and at home. The future wasn't perfect, but Michael knew that with each step, he was getting closer to what he had longed for, a family he could be proud of. The weeks following that pivotal meeting with Luke brought both a sense of relief and an underlying anxiety. Michael knew that every interaction, every moment with Luke was a chance to prove he had changed, not just through words, but through actions. He had made progress, but he understood that trust wasn't something that could be built in a single conversation. It would take time, and he was prepared to wait. At work, the excitement surrounding the new opportunity at the Boring Company continued to grow. Elon Musk had followed up on their conversation with an official meeting, and soon after, Michael was offered a position overseeing one of the company's most critical projects. The chance was not only a major career move, but also a validation of how far he had come from his homeless days. Yet, the new role came with its own set of challenges. The hours were long, the expectations high, and the pressure intense. But Michael couldn't afford to let his focus waver, not on his work, and certainly not on his relationship with Luke. As the weeks passed, Michael's new job consumed more and more of his time. He worked late into the night, strategizing, overseeing meetings, and making decisions that would impact the company's future. He had always been driven by success, and now that he had the chance to prove himself, he threw himself into it without hesitation. Yet, in the midst of all the late nights and high-pressure meetings, he started to notice something he hadn't anticipated, a subtle shift in his personal life. Luke had started pulling away again. It wasn't drastic, but the signs were clear. The weekly meetings had started becoming less frequent. Luke's messages became more sporadic. Sarah, ever the mediator, tried to reassure Michael, but even she couldn't deny the growing distance. "Michael, I think Luke's struggling with all the changes. He wants to see you, but he's also trying to process everything that's been happening," Sarah explained one evening as they spoke on the phone. "He's not sure where you fit into his life now." Michael felt a pang of guilt. The balance between his career and his personal life had always been a delicate one, but now that he had this new position, he realized how much of his time was being eaten up by work. Was this what he had been afraid of all along? That the very thing he worked so hard to achieve would start pushing him further away from the people who mattered most? "I don't know what to do anymore," Michael admitted, his voice heavy with frustration. "I thought I could handle it all, but it feels like I'm losing him again." The tension between his personal and professional life reached a boiling point when, one morning, Michael was pulled into a critical project at work, an initiative that Elon Musk himself was overseeing. The project was groundbreaking, and Michael's input was vital. It would require him to be away from home for several days, traveling to different cities for meetings, and to supervise the execution of the project. Michael, this is a huge opportunity, Elon said during their meeting. You're ready for this. Just make sure you keep your eyes on the prize. The problem was that Michael's eyes were now divided between two prizes. The opportunity at work, the one he had dreamed about, and the chance to rebuild the fractured relationship with his son. When Michael informed Sarah of the upcoming trip, she was supportive but also cautious. Just make sure you're not overdoing it, she said. Luke needs to know you're there. Work can wait, but your son needs you now more than ever. Michael knew she was right. The guilt gnawed at him, but he also understood that the trip was part of his responsibility at work. He didn't want to lose this chance, but he also didn't want to lose Luke. The weekend came, and Michael returned home to prepare for his business trip. He hadn't heard from Luke in days, and the silence was beginning to weigh on him. After weeks of steady communication, Luke's lack of response felt like a setback. Was he angry? Was he upset with Michael for being so busy? Michael decided to visit Luke at his apartment. The last thing he wanted was to let this distance grow any further. When he arrived, he was surprised to find Luke sitting alone, staring out the window, his expression distant. It was clear that something was bothering him. Michael approached slowly, unsure of how to break the silence. "Hey," Michael said softly, "can we talk?" Luke didn't immediately respond, but after a moment, he turned and met his father's eyes. "I've been thinking a lot, Dad. About you, about me, about everything." Michael sat down beside him, his heart racing. "I know I've been busy. Too busy, maybe. I'm sorry for that. But I'm not going anywhere. I promise." Luke didn't look convinced. "It's not just that, Dad. You've been so caught up in your new job and everything that I don't know where I fit in anymore. I get that you're doing well, but I feel like I'm just supposed to fit into your schedule whenever it works for you. I don't know if that's what I want anymore." Michael's stomach dropped. The words stung, but they also hit him with a hard truth he had been avoiding. He had been so focused on proving himself in his career that he hadn't fully considered what Luke might be feeling. He had made the same mistake again, even after everything he had learned. "I'm sorry, Luke," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been selfish. I thought I could do everything at once, and I didn't stop to think about how it was affecting you. You deserve better than that. I need to do better." There was a long pause before Luke spoke again. "I don't need you to fix everything, Dad. I just need you to be here. Not when it's convenient, but when I need you. And right now, I need you to not be so distracted all the time." The weight of his son's words settled over Michael like a heavy fog. He had made a promise to Luke, and it was time to keep it. The following day, as Michael packed for his trip, he made a decision. He would no longer let his work consume every aspect of his life. He knew that the job opportunity with the boring company was a once-in-a-lifetime chance, but he also realized that no career achievement could replace the connection with his son. Before heading out, Michael sent a message to Elon, explaining that he needed to take a step back from the current project to focus on his personal life. He was honest, explaining that while he appreciated the opportunity, he needed to prioritize rebuilding his relationship with Luke. When Elon responded, he was surprisingly understanding. "Michael, I respect your decision. Family always comes first. We'll be here when you're ready to dive back in. Take care of yourself and your son." Michael felt a weight lift from his shoulders as he sent the reply. He was finally choosing balance, choosing family. He didn't know what the future would hold, but for the first time in a long time, he felt confident that he was on the right path. And as he closed his suitcase and walked out the door, he knew that, for the first time, his choices were no longer just about proving himself, they were about showing up, not just for himself, but for his son. It had been a few weeks since Michael had made the decision to pull back from the fast-paced demands of his career. The transition wasn't easy, and there were moments when he questioned whether he had made the right choice. But every time he saw the positive impact his decision was having on his relationship with Luke, he knew that it had been the right one. Michael had promised himself that he would be more present, and every day he worked hard to keep that promise. He started by spending more time with Luke, no more late-night calls from work, no more skipped weekends. They started doing things together that they hadn't done in years. Fishing, playing basketball, and even sitting down for dinner without distractions. Little by little, their relationship began to heal. One Saturday morning, Luke called Michael, asking if he wanted to go on a hike. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was a step, another opportunity for connection. Michael didn't hesitate. "I'd love to," he said. "Let's do it." As they walked side by side along the trail, the conversation flowed effortlessly. There were no heavy topics at first, just casual talk about the weather, the best spots to hike, and even a few jokes about their past. The weight of years of silence and unresolved tension seemed lighter with each step. Luke was the first to break the quiet. "Dad, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how you're trying to be there for me." Michael looked at his son, who seemed more open than ever before. "I meant it, Luke. I'm not going anywhere this time. I'm trying to be a better father, a better person. I know I can't change the past, but I'm here now, and I'm not going to mess this up again." Luke nodded, his face thoughtful. "I believe you. I really do. It's just, sometimes it's hard to trust that things will stay good." Michael understood. Trust was fragile. It had taken years to break, and it wouldn't be rebuilt overnight. But he was willing to do whatever it took. "I get it, Luke. I know you don't owe me anything, but all I can do is show you, day by day, that I'm here for you. That's all I can promise." Luke smiled, a small, genuine smile that made Michael's heart swell with pride. "That's enough for now." A few days later, something unexpected happened. Michael received a call from his old friend, Eric, who had been one of the few people to stay in touch with him during his hardest times. Eric had heard about the changes in Michael's life, his job with the boring company, his reconciliation with Luke, and he wanted to catch up. Eric had been a reminder of Michael's past, a reminder of who he used to be and who he could become. They met at a cafe near Michael's apartment, and as soon as Eric walked in, Michael couldn't help but smile. "You look good, man," Eric said, shaking Michael's hand. "I've heard a lot about you lately. I'm proud of you." They sat down, and Michael realized how much he had missed their conversations. Eric was one of those people who could always bring humor to any situation, and their time together had always been a source of comfort. "I've been trying," Michael admitted, "trying to be better. It's a struggle some days, but I think I'm finally getting it right." Eric raised an eyebrow. "Finally? I never doubted you, man. You've always had it in you. You just needed to believe in yourself." Michael nodded, feeling the weight of those words sink in. "It's funny. I spent so many years running from the past, trying to escape who I was. But now, I think I've finally accepted that I am who I am because of what I've been through. And I'm okay with that." Eric smiled. "You know, that's the first step. You can't change the past, but you sure can shape the future. You've already started doing that with Luke." As the days passed, Michael continued to grow into his new role as a father. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't always smooth. There were still moments of tension, moments when Michael felt like he was failing, moments when he wasn't sure if Luke truly believed in him. But the key difference now was that Michael was committed to staying the course. He wasn't going anywhere. Then, one evening, as Michael sat in his apartment reflecting on the changes in his life, he received another message from Elon Musk. Subject: Catch up? Elon Musk: "Hey Michael, it's been a while. I've been thinking about you and the work we discussed. There's still a huge opportunity waiting for you here, but I want to make sure it aligns with what you're trying to do in your personal life. Let's chat soon, and we can figure out the next steps." Michael read the message several times, his mind racing. This was the same opportunity he had set aside months ago. The offer was still on the table, but now, things were different. He wasn't just chasing success anymore. He had found something even more precious: his relationship with Luke. He sat in silence for a moment, weighing the decision. Did he go back to the boring company and throw himself into his career once again? Or did he continue down the path of balance, keeping his family as his priority? The following evening, Michael sat down with Luke, unsure of how to broach the subject. He had been given a chance to return to the boring company, but it would mean more time away from Luke, more pressure, more work. It was a chance to take his career to the next level, but it could also pull him away from everything he had worked so hard to build with his son. "Dad, is something wrong?" Luke asked, sensing his father's tension. Michael sighed deeply. "I've been given another chance at my job, a huge one. It's everything I've worked for, but I don't want it to come at the cost of what we've built. I don't want to lose you again, Luke. I don't want to mess this up. Luke looked at him thoughtfully for a moment. Dad, I think I'm okay with whatever you decide. I just want you to be happy. And if this job makes you happy, then I'll support it. Just don't disappear again, okay? Michael smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude for the understanding his son had shown. I promise, Luke. I've learned what matters most, and I won't lose sight of that again. He typed a quick reply to Elon's message, expressing his gratitude for the offer, but also explaining that he was taking time to focus on his family. The response was understanding, and Elon wished him the best in his personal journey. Michael felt a sense of relief wash over him. The road ahead wasn't clear, but one thing was certain. He had found the balance he had been searching for. Family would always come first. Everything else, he could manage. It had been 2 months since Michael made the decision to step back from his fast-paced career and prioritize his relationship with Luke. The transition hadn't been easy, but it had been transformative. What had once been a strained father-son bond, barely held together by occasional phone calls and hurried visits, was now growing into something stronger, more genuine. There were still tough days, but they were fewer now. They had learned to communicate better, to spend time together without distractions, and to trust each other again. As autumn settled in, the world around them began to change. The trees in the park near their apartment turned shades of orange and yellow, and the crisp air reminded Michael of how much he had taken for granted over the years. It wasn't just the weather that had changed, it was his entire perspective on life. One afternoon, Michael and Luke decided to visit a nearby farmer's market. It was one of the small pleasures they'd started enjoying together, a way to bond without the pressures of the past. They walked through the stalls, laughing as they picked out fresh produce, joking over what they should cook for dinner. Maybe we could try making a roast together, Luke suggested. I've been watching this YouTube channel on how to cook meals from scratch. Thought it might be fun to try. Michael smiled. You know, I never would have imagined you'd be the one to get into cooking, but I'm game. Let's do it. They returned home with their ingredients, and as they prepared dinner together, it felt like everything had finally come full circle. Luke, who had once been angry and distant, was now genuinely enjoying his time with his father. It was moments like this, small, simple, yet filled with meaning, that Michael cherished the most. Later that evening, after dinner, as they sat on the couch and watched TV together, Michael's phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. Sarah, hey, I've been thinking a lot about your decision with the job. You're doing the right thing by focusing on Luke, but have you thought about how you can keep moving forward with your career while still being present? I know it's hard to balance both, but there might be opportunities that work for you. Michael read the message and set the phone down. He knew Sarah meant well, and he appreciated her support, but he had already made his choice. His relationship with Luke was his priority. He wasn't going to rush back into a high-powered job just for the sake of ambition. At the same time, Michael understood the importance of not letting his career stagnate. He had worked hard to get to where he was, and he still wanted to have a sense of purpose outside of being a father. He didn't want to lose himself in the process of rebuilding his life. The next day, Michael made an important decision. He would take on some freelance projects that allowed him to work from home. He'd stay in the game, but without the overwhelming pressure of a corporate job. It was a compromise, but it was one that felt right. He could continue to grow professionally while still being present for Luke. A few weeks after that, Michael's life would take another unexpected turn. He had been contacted by a former colleague who had left the boring company years ago. His name was Adam, and he had been a mentor to Michael when he first started out in the tech world. Adam had heard about Michael's decision to step away from his previous job and had an offer that might align perfectly with Michael's new life path. Adam explained over the phone that he had recently joined a startup that focused on sustainable energy solutions and was looking for someone with Michael's background to take on a leadership role. I know you've been focusing on family, and that's great, Adam said, but I think this could be a good fit. It's a smaller, more flexible company with a mission that might resonate with you. Michael was intrigued, but also cautious. He had seen how easily work could consume his life, and he didn't want to fall back into old habits. But there was something about Adam's offer that felt different. There was potential for growth, and it seemed to fit within the framework of the life he had started to rebuild. That evening, after talking things through with Luke and Sarah, Michael decided to take the next step and explore this opportunity. He wasn't committing to anything yet, but he was open to seeing where it could lead. The very next day, Michael received a call from Elon Musk, and his voice was familiar but distant. "Michael, I've been hearing good things about you. I know you've made some changes in your life, but I wanted to reach out personally. There's a chance we could work together again on some new projects at Tesla. It's a different role, something that allows you to have more balance, but with the same level of impact. Think about it." Michael paused. He had been so focused on his family and the choices he had made that he hadn't expected this call. Elon's voice was persuasive, and Michael had a deep respect for the work that Tesla was doing. But he was also careful not to let his ambitions cloud his judgment. "I appreciate the offer, Elon," Michael said thoughtfully, "but I found something that works for me right now. I'm focused on my family and my personal life. I'm not looking for more pressure at the moment." There was a silence on the other end of the line. "I understand, Michael. It's your decision, but don't forget that these opportunities don't always come around again. Just remember, if you ever want to come back, we'll be here." Michael hung up the phone, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. He had made his choice, and he was confident it was the right one. As the weeks turned into months, Michael continued to adjust to his new routine. He had started working from home more, balancing freelance projects with his commitment to Luke. They spent their weekends exploring new hobbies, taking day trips to nearby towns, and building a life they both felt proud of. Michael also found himself reconnecting with other people from his past, friends he had lost touch with during his years of isolation and career-driven obsession. They were supportive of his decision to put family first, and many admired how he had turned his life around. The days seemed to blur together, but in the best possible way. Each moment spent with Luke, whether it was playing games, working on projects, or just having quiet talks about life, was a reminder of what truly mattered. Michael didn't need a high-powered job or recognition to feel fulfilled. His greatest success was in the simple, everyday moments with his son. And as they sat together one night, watching the sunset from their apartment balcony, Michael realized that, finally, he had found the peace and happiness he had longed for. The road ahead was still unknown, but it didn't matter. He had what he needed: a second chance, a stronger bond with his son, and the confidence to live life on his own terms. As Michael's days became more centered on his family and his work at home, he began to notice a transformation in himself. He was no longer the man who had once been defined solely by his career and ambitions. Instead, he had become a person who understood the value of presence, being fully present in every moment, whether it was with Luke, his friends, or even his own thoughts. But as much as he had embraced this new life, he still struggled with the idea of the future. What would his long-term career look like? Would he stay in the freelance world, content with balancing personal fulfillment and professional work? Or would he eventually take on a more demanding role again? The questions loomed, but they didn't seem as urgent as they once had. One Sunday afternoon, as he and Luke were putting together a puzzle in the living room, Michael's phone buzzed with another unexpected message. "Sarah, hey, Michael, I was thinking about something. Have you ever thought about starting your own company? You've got so much experience and wisdom now, and I think there's a real opportunity to build something meaningful. I know it might seem like a big leap, but with everything you've learned, it could be the perfect time." Michael stared at the screen for a few moments, turning the idea over in his mind. The prospect of building something from scratch, the idea of using his skills to create something that could impact others, was both exciting and daunting. He had always been a part of other people's projects, working in large companies with big names. But the thought of creating his own venture sparked something deep inside him. "Dad, you okay?" Luke asked, sensing his father's distraction. Michael smiled and set the phone down. "Yeah, just thinking about something. But you know what? You're right. Let's focus on this puzzle for now. You're winning anyway." Luke grinned, and they returned to their game. But in the back of Michael's mind, the idea was growing. Could he start something of his own? Was it even possible to balance that with his commitment to family? The next day, while Michael was working on a freelance project, his mind wandered back to Sarah's message. He thought about the kind of company he would want to build. It couldn't just be another tech startup or business focused solely on profits. He wanted to create something with purpose, something that would help others, something that would make a difference. He thought back to his time at the Boring Company and how the work there had always had a larger vision, a goal to change the world in a meaningful way. That sense of purpose had driven him to work long hours, to sacrifice his time and energy. But now, he was more clear-headed. He wanted a purpose that didn't require losing touch with what mattered most, his family. He jotted down some ideas in a notebook. Maybe he could work on a venture related to sustainable technology, or perhaps something focused on mental health in the workplace, an issue he had personally struggled with. He could blend his experience with tech and his growing understanding of the importance of personal well-being. As he sketched out his ideas, Michael felt the spark of inspiration that had eluded him for so long. This could be his new beginning. That evening, after dinner, Michael decided to share his thoughts with Luke. "Hey, I've been thinking about something. What do you think about starting a business?" Luke looked up from his phone, intrigued. "A business? Like what?" Michael smiled. "I'm not sure yet, but I want to create something that helps people, you know? Maybe something in tech or mental health. I just feel like I need to do something more, something that could make a real difference." Luke nodded slowly. "That sounds pretty cool, Dad. I mean, if you can do it and still be here, that'd be awesome." Michael felt a wave of pride as he looked at his son. "You know, I think I can do it, but I need your help. I want you to be a part of it." Luke raised an eyebrow. "My help? What do you mean?" "Well, I could use your ideas. I've been thinking about this, and I think it's a good opportunity to get your perspective on things too. You've got a fresh view on the world, and I think that could really help shape what we build." Luke's expression softened. "I'd like that, Dad. I really would." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Michael threw himself into researching and planning for his potential startup, but this time, he wasn't alone. Luke, excited about the idea, helped brainstorm and even started researching different aspects of the business. They spent evenings discussing their ideas, laying out plans for what this new venture could look like, and how they could balance it with their lives. It wasn't easy. There were moments when Michael doubted whether he could juggle everything. Whether it was the pressure of starting something new or the constant balancing act between work and family. But with Luke by his side, it felt possible. He wasn't in this alone anymore. Luke even helped with the marketing ideas, suggesting creative ways to use social media to spread the word and engage potential customers. His fresh, youthful perspective proved to be invaluable, and Michael began to realize how much they made a great team. Just when Michael was feeling the most optimistic about the direction he was heading, another phone call arrived. One that would change everything once again. It was from Adam, the former colleague who had offered him a role in the sustainable energy startup. "Michael, I know you've been thinking about what you want to do, and I wanted to check in. We're expanding rapidly, and I think your expertise could be a great fit. I understand if you're not interested, but we could really use someone with your experience to lead a new project." Michael had been expecting the call, but still felt the weight of the decision ahead. He had worked so hard to build something for himself and Luke, but this opportunity was different. It was something that would allow him to make a real difference in the world of sustainable energy. "Adam," Michael said after a long pause, "I appreciate the offer, but I think I'm on the path to something new. I've decided to start my own company. It's going to take time, but I'm committed to making it work." There was a brief silence on the other end. "I understand, Michael. I know you're ready for something bigger. Just remember that if you ever want to talk, we're here for you." Michael hung up the phone and sat quietly for a moment. He had made his choice. It was bold. It was uncertain, but it was his. As the months passed, Michael and Luke's business idea began to take shape. They officially launched their startup, a small, boutique company focused on developing accessible mental health solutions for workplaces. It was a venture that combined technology, human-centered design, and an emphasis on employee well-being. It was only the beginning, but the response from the community was overwhelmingly positive. People were eager for a company that understood the importance of mental health, especially in today's fast-paced world. As they looked ahead to the future, Michael and Luke knew that their journey had only just begun. There would be challenges ahead. There always were. But they were ready to face them together. This was their new chapter, and it was one that they would write side by side. The road ahead was uncertain, but with each step, they were creating something meaningful. And that, Michael realized, was the greatest success of all. As Michael and Luke's startup began to gain traction, they quickly realized that starting a business was far from easy. The initial excitement of launching their venture was quickly replaced with the reality of the long, often grueling work required to turn their vision into a thriving company. But as challenging as it was, they found themselves more determined than ever to make it work. Luke had taken on the role of social media manager, and his natural creativity helped their startup get noticed online. He came up with innovative ways to reach their target audience, primarily small to mid-sized companies, through engaging content that highlighted the importance of mental health in the workplace. Michael, on the other hand, focused on building the business itself, developing the product, and establishing partnerships with other like-minded organizations. While they made progress, the challenges soon started to pile up. There were delays in product development, tight budgets, and the constant pressure of trying to stay ahead of competitors. At times, Michael found himself questioning if they were doing the right thing, if this was all just an ambitious pipe dream that might eventually fade away. But then, he would look over at Luke, his son, his business partner, and remind himself why they had started this journey in the first place. One evening, after a particularly stressful week, Michael and Luke sat down at the kitchen table to have one of their regular meetings. They had been working long hours, and the strain was starting to show. Luke was quieter than usual, his eyes tired from the constant stream of messages and emails he had been sending out. Michael wasn't doing much better. The pressure was wearing on him. "Are you okay, Dad?" Luke asked, his voice concerned. Michael leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. "Yeah, I'm just thinking. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but sometimes I wonder if we're taking on too much too soon. The product's not where I want it to be yet, and we're constantly fighting for attention in a crowded market. It's just overwhelming sometimes." Luke nodded, a slight frown on his face. "I get it. I mean, we've put a lot of work into this, but maybe we're not giving ourselves enough credit. We're actually making progress, right? We've got a real product now. We've got people interested. That's something." Michael smiled at his son, grateful for his optimism. "You're right. We have made progress. It's just hard to see it when we're in the trenches every day." He paused, then added, "But we'll get through it. We've got each other, and we're building something that's worth it." Luke's expression softened. "I think we'll make it, Dad. We've already come so far." Michael realized that Luke was right. They had made significant strides, and while the road ahead was still uncertain, they were on the right path. The bond they had formed during this process was something he would never take for granted. Just when things seemed to be turning around, they received a setback that threatened to derail their momentum. One of the key partnerships they had been working on for months fell through at the last minute. The company they had been collaborating with had decided to go in a different direction, leaving Michael and Luke with a significant gap in their business plan. It was a tough pill to swallow. Michael had put so much time and energy into securing that deal, and it felt like a major blow to their progress. For the first time since they had started the business, Michael felt truly defeated. He sat down on the couch that night, staring at the blank screen of his laptop. Luke had already gone to bed, but Michael couldn't bring himself to sleep. Instead, he replayed the conversation in his mind, wondering where things had gone wrong. After a long while, he reached for his phone and sent a quick text to Sarah. "Michael, hey Sarah, I'm struggling a bit. We lost a big partnership today, and I'm not sure where to go from here. It feels like we're hitting roadblock after roadblock." Moments later, Sarah replied, "Sarah, I know this is hard, but don't give up now. Every entrepreneur faces setbacks. It's how you respond that matters. Take some time to regroup, and when you're ready, start thinking about the next move. You've come this far. Don't let one setback define the journey." Michael read her message several times, letting the words sink in. He knew she was right. This was just another hurdle to overcome. But it didn't change the fact that he felt the weight of the situation. The next morning, Michael decided to take Sarah's advice and step back for a bit. He took a walk alone through the park near his apartment, trying to clear his mind and think about the bigger picture. It was a beautiful day, and the crisp air filled his lungs as he walked, allowing him to release some of the tension that had built up over the past few months. As he walked, he thought about the very reason they had started the company. It wasn't about becoming a millionaire or gaining fame. It was about helping people, offering solutions for workplaces that valued the mental well-being of their employees. That mission was still intact, and it was still worth fighting for. When he returned home, Luke was already up and working at the kitchen table. Michael sat down beside him, and after a moment of silence, he spoke. "I've been thinking," Michael said. "We're not giving up on this, okay? We've got a good product, a good vision. The partnership we lost. It hurts, but we can keep going. We just have to be smarter and work harder to find the right fit." Luke looked up from his laptop, meeting his father's gaze. "I'm with you, Dad. We'll find a way." And with that, Michael knew that they could do it. They had already faced so much together, and this setback was just another challenge to overcome. It wasn't the end. It was a beginning. Over the next few weeks, Michael and Luke worked tirelessly to find new partnerships. They adjusted their marketing strategies, refined their pitch, and even rethought their business model in some ways. They kept reaching out to potential clients, focusing on building genuine connections rather than just pushing for sales. Slowly but surely, their hard work began to pay off. They secured a new partnership with a startup that shared their values on mental health, and it was a game changer. This new collaboration opened up opportunities for them to reach more businesses and expand their client base. Their product was getting the attention it deserved, and they were starting to see tangible results. Through it all, Michael never lost sight of what was most important: his family. Luke had become not just his son, but his trusted business partner. They were building something special together, and that was all that mattered. As the months went by, the business continued to grow, and Michael found himself feeling more and more fulfilled. He had taken the risks, faced the challenges, and emerged stronger. But it wasn't just the success of the business that mattered. It was the fact that he had done it with the people who meant the most to him by his side. One evening, as Michael and Luke sat on the balcony of their apartment, watching the sun set over the city skyline, Michael turned to his son. "You know, Luke," Michael said, his voice full of pride, "this is only the beginning. We've come so far, but we're just getting started." Luke grinned, his eyes shining with excitement. "Yeah, Dad, we've got a long way to go, but I think we're going to make it. Together." And with that, Michael knew they were ready for whatever came next. They had found their way, not just in business, but in life. And as long as they had each other, there was nothing they couldn't face. The months that followed marked a period of intense growth for Michael and Luke's company. They had weathered the storm of setbacks and emerged more resilient, but with success came new challenges. The startup was gaining momentum, but with that success came expectations, both internal and external. They were no longer just fighting for survival. They were now fighting to sustain and scale their dream. The demands of running a growing company meant that both Michael and Luke had less time for themselves. The days became longer, the hours blurred into one another, and the balance between work and life began to shift in ways that neither of them had expected. One night, as they sat in the conference room late into the evening, Michael glanced over at Luke, who was focused on his screen, typing away without pause. "Luke," Michael said, breaking the silence, "how's it going? Are you doing okay?" Luke didn't look up immediately but stopped typing for a moment. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just, a lot on my plate right now. But we're making progress, right? That's all that matters." Michael studied his son carefully. He could tell Luke was pushing himself too hard, just as he had done so many times before. The weight of their success, and their failures, was taking its toll on them both. But it wasn't just the work that was wearing him down. It was the pressure they were placing on themselves to keep moving forward at all costs. "I know," Michael replied, his voice softer now, "but we have to remember to take care of ourselves, too. We can't run on empty forever. Maybe it's time we take a step back, just for a day or two, and recharge." Luke hesitated. "I don't know if I can. There's so much to do. I've been putting in hours trying to build the brand, keep up with customer feedback, manage the website, and it feels like there's always more to do." Michael stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the darkened skyline. The city below seemed quiet, almost peaceful, but the reality of their hectic lives was anything but peaceful. "I get it, son. Trust me, I do. But if we don't take care of ourselves, we'll lose the very thing we're building. We need to be strong, not just for the company, but for each other. We can't keep running like this." Luke finally looked up, meeting his father's eyes. "You're right, Dad. I guess I've just been so focused on making sure everything's perfect that I forgot about the bigger picture. I don't want to burn out. None of us do, Michael said with a gentle smile. But we have to be smart about it. I think it's time for us to take a little break, even if it's just for a weekend. We've been at this for a while, and it wouldn't hurt to step away for a bit and come back with fresh eyes. Luke nodded, a tired but relieved expression crossing his face. All right, let's do it. A break sounds good. The next weekend, Michael and Luke decided to take a short trip to the mountains, a place that had always been a source of peace and perspective for Michael. It had been years since they had visited, and it felt like the right time to reconnect with themselves and the world beyond their screens. As they drove up the winding mountain roads, the noise of the city seemed to fade away, replaced by the serenity of nature. The air grew crisp and cool, and the landscape unfolded before them in a breathtaking panorama of towering trees, jagged cliffs, and misty valleys. The silence was almost deafening in its contrast to the constant hum of their daily lives. When they arrived at the cabin, nestled at the foot of a cliff, Michael felt an immediate sense of relief. It was as if the weight of the world had been lifted, even if just for a little while. They spent the next few days hiking, cooking together, and simply enjoying each other's company without the stress of deadlines, emails, and phone calls. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch watching the sun dip behind the mountains, Michael turned to Luke, his voice filled with gratitude. I'm glad we did this. It's easy to forget what really matters when you're caught up in the grind. But being here reminds me of why we're doing all of this in the first place. Luke smiled, leaning back in his chair. Yeah, me too. It's been nice to just breathe for a bit. The calm of the mountain air seemed to put things in perspective. The pressures of the business, the constant rush to succeed, they seemed so much smaller now. Michael realized that it wasn't about pushing harder and faster all the time. It was about balance, patience, and understanding that success didn't need to come at the cost of their well-being. By the time they returned to the city, Michael and Luke felt reinvigorated. They were ready to take on the challenges ahead, but now with a clearer vision and a renewed sense of purpose. The break had allowed them both to reflect on what was truly important: the impact they were having on people's lives, the company they were building, and most importantly, the family they had formed through their work together. Back in the office, they dove back into their work with a renewed sense of focus. They reached out to new clients, tweaked their business model, and brainstormed ways to bring their message of mental health awareness to an even wider audience. This time, however, they worked smarter, not harder. They delegated tasks, leaned on trusted advisors, and allowed themselves to take breaks when they needed to. Their partnership was stronger than ever, built on a foundation of mutual respect, understanding, and a shared vision. As the business grew, so did their understanding of what success truly meant. It wasn't just about reaching a certain milestone or making a certain amount of money. It was about the impact they were having on their clients, the way they were changing workplaces for the better, and the legacy they were building together. One evening, as Michael and Luke sat in the office, reflecting on their journey so far, Michael felt a sense of contentment he hadn't experienced in a long time. They had come so far, from the struggles of homelessness and rebuilding a life to the success of their business. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, they knew one thing for sure: they were ready for whatever came next. Well, look, Michael said, glancing over at his son. We're doing it. We're really doing it. Luke smiled, his eyes gleaming with pride. Yeah, we are, Dad. And we're only just getting started. With that, they both turned their focus to the future, full of promise, challenges, and opportunities, but more confident than ever in their ability to face it all together. As their business continued to grow, Michael and Luke began to realize that success wasn't just about building a company. It was about building a community. They had spent so much time focusing on creating the right product and making the right deals, but they hadn't fully realized the impact that their company could have on the lives of others beyond just their clients. It started with the messages they received from people who had been following their journey. Employees from various companies, mental health advocates, and even strangers sent them notes of gratitude, sharing how their work had inspired or helped them. One message, in particular, stood out to Michael. It was from a man named Chris, a former soldier who had struggled with PTSD and depression after his time in the military. He wrote about how Michael's story, about starting from nothing and rebuilding his life, had inspired him to seek help and to start his own journey toward healing. Reading Chris's message made Michael pause. It was a moment of realization that the work they were doing was more than just a business. It was making a real difference in people's lives, even beyond the workplace. Luke was the first to see the change in his father's demeanor when he read the message aloud to him. "That's why we're doing this, isn't it?" Michael said softly, looking at the message on his screen. "It's not just about helping companies. It's about reaching people, making them feel seen and heard." Luke nodded. "Exactly. When we started, we wanted to change the way people think about mental health. I didn't realize how big of an impact it could have until now." This realization sparked a new direction for their business. They decided to shift some of their focus from strictly corporate partnerships to working more closely with organizations that supported mental health initiatives, veteran groups, and nonprofits that helped marginalized communities. They wanted to be a part of something bigger, a movement that went beyond business. Michael and Luke didn't waste any time putting this new vision into action. They reached out to a few local organizations that focused on mental health advocacy and veterans support, offering their services for free to help improve the mental well-being of employees and volunteers in those sectors. One of the first organizations they partnered with was a veterans rehabilitation center that helped former soldiers transition to civilian life. Michael's heart swelled with pride when they received an invitation to speak at one of their events. He knew firsthand the struggles that veterans faced when trying to find their footing after returning from active duty, and being able to help them meant the world to him. The event was held at a community center, and as Michael and Luke stood in front of a room full of veterans, active service members, and their families, Michael couldn't help but feel a wave of gratitude wash over him. These were the very people who had fought for their country, and now they were being given the tools to fight for their own well-being. The event kicked off with Michael sharing his own story about his time in the military, his struggles with homelessness, and his journey of rebuilding his life. His words resonated deeply with the audience, and he could see it in their eyes. The recognition, the understanding, the hope that someone else had been through something similar and had come out stronger on the other side. As Michael spoke, Luke set up a booth in the corner of the room, sharing information about the company's mental health services for workplaces. They offered free consultations, free workshops, and free resources for anyone who wanted to make mental health a priority in their lives. By the end of the event, Michael and Luke had not only gained new business contacts but had also made connections with people who were genuinely passionate about mental health advocacy. For Michael, the experience was transformative. He had never imagined that his struggles could lead to something so meaningful. He realized that they were helping people, not just businesses. A few days after the veterans event, Michael and Luke received an unexpected invitation. It was an email from none other than Elon Musk's office. "Mr. Musk would like to meet with you both to discuss your work and explore potential ways to collaborate," the email read. Michael stared at the message in disbelief. "This has to be a joke," he muttered, rubbing his eyes to make sure he wasn't imagining it. But it was real. "Elon Musk?" Luke asked, equally stunned. "Are you serious? That's insane." They quickly confirmed the meeting and were soon on a plane heading to Tesla's headquarters in California. Michael could hardly believe it. After everything they had been through, after all the struggles, the doubts, and the hard work, this was the kind of opportunity they had never expected. Meeting someone like Elon Musk could change everything for their business and for the mission they were on. When they arrived at Tesla's headquarters, they were escorted through the sleek, high-tech building, finally entering a spacious conference room. Elon Musk was sitting at the head of the table, his casual demeanor giving no hint of the weight of his influence. "Mr. Musk, thank you for taking the time to meet with us," Michael said, shaking his hand. "This is an incredible opportunity for us." Elon smiled and motioned for them to sit. "It's my pleasure. I've been following your work for some time now. You're doing something important. I wanted to hear more about it." Michael and Luke spent the next hour discussing their company's mission, their journey, and their future plans. Elon listened intently, occasionally asking questions or offering feedback. By the end of the meeting, he had made it clear that he was interested in supporting their cause. "I think we could do something big together," Elon said, his tone thoughtful. "You're helping people, and that's what matters. Let's figure out how we can make a larger impact." It was a moment that Michael and Luke would never forget. Their dream was no longer just their own. It was being recognized by some of the most influential people in the world. And as they left Tesla's headquarters that day, Michael couldn't help but feel that they were on the cusp of something even greater than they had ever imagined. The meeting with Elon Musk marked a pivotal moment in their journey. In the weeks that followed, the partnership began to take shape. Tesla and other companies in Musk's network offered resources, exposure, and connections that would help their business grow exponentially. But it wasn't just about the business side of things. It was about reaching more people, helping more individuals and organizations make mental health a priority in their lives. Michael and Luke returned to their work with renewed energy, knowing that they were no longer alone in their mission. They had the support of powerful allies, but more importantly, they had the belief that what they were doing truly mattered. The future was bright, and as they looked ahead, they knew that the work they were doing was more than just building a company. It was building a legacy. Together, Michael and Luke had started with nothing, but they had created something that would continue to grow, inspire, and change lives for years to come. And the journey was far from over. With the partnership with Tesla and Elon Musk in full swing, Michael and Luke found themselves at a crossroads. Their company had experienced more growth in the past few months than they had ever anticipated. The influx of new resources, recognition, and connections brought both excitement and pressure. They were no longer a small startup trying to stay afloat. They were becoming a force to be reckoned with in the mental health and wellness space. But with this newfound success came new challenges. They had to scale their business to meet the demand while staying true to their mission. The larger their company grew, the harder it was to maintain the personal touch that had made them so successful in the first place. The core values that had driven them, empathy, compassion, and understanding, had to be woven into every aspect of the business, even as they expanded. One of the first things they did was bring in new team members. Michael and Luke were determined to hire people who shared their vision, people who not only had the right skills but who understood the importance of mental health advocacy and the mission to change workplace culture for the better. Luke took charge of the hiring process, ensuring that they weren't just filling roles, but building a team that was aligned with their values. He wanted employees who were passionate, driven, and who could contribute to the company's culture in meaningful ways. Meanwhile, Michael focused on strengthening the company's partnerships and expanding their reach. They were receiving more and more requests from large corporations, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations alike, all eager to integrate mental health services into their operations. It was a sign that their message was resonating, but it also meant that they had to find a way to scale their services without losing the personal touch that had made them successful in the first place. As the business grew, Michael and Luke quickly realized that they could no longer handle everything on their own. They needed to build a support system, a network of trusted experts, mental health professionals, and business advisors to help guide the company through this period of rapid expansion. They hired a chief operations officer, Sarah, who had extensive experience scaling companies. Sarah's expertise was invaluable in helping them streamline processes, improve efficiency, and ensure that they could deliver high-quality services to clients without overextending themselves. At the same time, they expanded their network of mental health professionals. They recruited therapists, counselors, and psychologists who could work with businesses to provide customized mental health programs and support. They also began offering workshops, webinars, and other resources aimed at educating employers and employees about mental health in the workplace. As they scaled their services, the demand continued to rise. They began working with companies across various industries, from tech giants to manufacturing firms, each one eager to adopt the mental health practices they were promoting. Their workshops on resilience, stress management, and emotional well-being became some of the most sought-after resources in corporate training. But despite the success, the pressure to keep up with demand weighed heavily on both Michael and Luke. They had reached new heights, but it wasn't without sacrifices. There were times when they would stay up late, working on reports, presentations, and proposals, barely able to find time for themselves. Their work-life balance was still a work in progress, but they knew they had to stay focused. One evening, after a particularly long day of meetings and calls, Michael found himself sitting alone in his office, staring out the window at the city lights below. He hadn't had a moment to himself in weeks. It was the kind of exhaustion that made it hard to think straight. His mind was constantly racing with thoughts of what needed to be done next, how they could continue to grow, and whether they were making the right decisions. He thought back to the beginning, the days when he had nothing, when he had been homeless, when his only focus was survival. It seemed like a lifetime ago. Now, he was sitting at the helm of a growing company with resources and opportunities beyond what he had ever imagined. And yet, despite everything they had achieved, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were losing sight of something important. As the city buzzed outside, Michael realized he had lost touch with the very thing that had brought him peace in the past: simplicity. He remembered the mountain cabin, the quiet, the solitude, the time spent reflecting on what really mattered. Maybe it was time for another break, another moment to step away and reconnect with what had truly inspired him. He picked up his phone and called Luke. "Hey, son," he said when Luke answered. "I've been thinking. We need to take a step back again, just for a weekend. It's easy to get caught up in everything, but we need to remember why we're doing this." Luke's voice came through the phone, tired but understanding. "I agree, Dad. I've been feeling it too. We've been running on empty for a while now." Michael smiled, relieved that Luke understood. "Let's take a weekend, go to the cabin again. Just the two of us. We'll figure out the next steps after we've had some time to think." The next weekend, Michael and Luke returned to the cabin. The familiar silence greeted them as they unpacked and settled in. The mountain air was crisp, the trees stood tall against the clear blue sky, and for the first time in weeks, they both felt a sense of calm. They spent their days hiking, cooking, and talking. Not about business or expansion, but about life, their experiences, and what they wanted their legacy to be. It was a time for reflection, for reconnecting with their roots, and for recalibrating their vision. On one of their hikes, Michael turned to Luke and said, "We've come so far, son, but I don't want to lose sight of what really matters. Our mission has always been to help people, to make a difference. We can't let success blind us to that." Luke nodded, taking a deep breath. "I get it, Dad. We've been so focused on scaling that we forgot the core of what we're doing. It's not just about growing the business. It's about continuing to impact people's lives." The weekend was a turning point for both of them. They realized that in their quest for success, they had to remain true to their mission. Growth was important, but it couldn't come at the expense of their values. When they returned to the city, they were reinvigorated, ready to tackle the next phase of their journey, but with a renewed commitment to balance, to purpose, and to ensuring that their company's growth didn't compromise the integrity of their mission. With their newfound perspective, Michael and Luke made adjustments to their business model. They continued to scale, but they focused more on sustainable growth, expanding at a pace that allowed them to maintain their personal connection with clients and employees. They also decided to launch a new initiative, a foundation dedicated to supporting veterans and others struggling with mental health issues. The foundation would provide free mental health services to those in need and work to raise awareness about the importance of mental well-being. Their company's mission, once just a dream, was now a thriving force for good, helping people across the world prioritize their mental health. Michael and Luke had come a long way, from the darkness of homelessness to the heights of success, but they knew their work was far from finished. As they looked to the future, they were more determined than ever to make a difference. They had learned that success wasn't just about reaching the top, it was about lifting others up along the way. And with that, they knew they were on the right path. The success of the Veterans Foundation marked a new chapter in Michael and Luke's journey. Their work had grown beyond the business side of things and had become a true movement, one that could make a tangible difference in people's lives. They had learned that scaling a company wasn't just about financial growth, but about expanding their vision and the impact they could have on communities across the country. As they began to see the ripple effects of their efforts, both in their business and in the foundation, they started to consider how they could reach even more people. The foundation was a success, but Michael had an idea to take it to a new level, one that would allow them to leverage their growing network of partners, employees, and supporters to create something even bigger. "Look," Michael said one afternoon in their office, "I've been thinking. We've built something good with the foundation, but what if we could scale it even further? What if we could get mental health support directly into schools, communities, and businesses across the country? Not just as a service, but as a part of people's daily lives. Make mental health as accessible as any other part of healthcare." Luke leaned back in his chair, clearly intrigued. That's ambitious, but it could change everything. Imagine if we could get every school, every office, every organization to prioritize mental health the same way they do physical health. Michael nodded. Exactly. I've seen firsthand how mental health can shape a person's entire life, and it's time we make it a priority on a much larger scale. I want to create a national initiative, something that becomes a part of the fabric of our society. I don't just want people to get help when things are bad. I want them to have the tools to thrive, to maintain their mental well-being every single day. Luke was silent for a moment, processing the enormity of the idea. Then, he smiled. Let's do it. The decision to expand their mission into a nationwide initiative was not something Michael and Luke took lightly. They knew that it would require significant resources, partnerships, and public support. But they also knew that the time was right. Mental health was becoming a more visible and urgent issue in society, and they were positioned to do something about it. They began by reaching out to their network of partners, including Elon Musk's team, other corporate allies, mental health professionals, and key influencers in the field of mental health advocacy. Together, they crafted a plan to launch a national initiative that would provide free mental health resources and support to schools, communities, and workplaces. The initiative would include educational programs, wellness tools, access to therapy, and resources for those in crisis. But it would also include a cultural shift, a movement to normalize mental health conversations and make seeking help a regular part of life, just like seeking physical health care. As the team worked on the logistics of the initiative, Michael and Luke knew that one of the most important elements would be education. People needed to understand the value of mental health before they could prioritize it. That's why they partnered with schools to develop curriculum for students that would teach them about mental health from a young age. By embedding mental health education into the fabric of school systems, they could help shape the next generation's approach to emotional well-being. As with any big undertaking, the journey was not without its obstacles. Despite the growing support for mental health initiatives across the country, Michael and Luke faced resistance. Many schools, businesses, and government entities were slow to adopt the initiative, unsure of how to implement the changes or how to prioritize something that hadn't traditionally been part of the conversation. One of the most challenging moments came when they attempted to get their initiative passed through Congress. Michael was invited to testify before a Senate subcommittee about the importance of mental health in schools and workplaces. It was a chance to make a lasting impact on policy, but it was also daunting. He knew the stakes were high, and if they couldn't get the necessary backing from lawmakers, their dreams of national change could fall apart. Standing before the committee, Michael felt the weight of the moment. His hands were slightly sweaty, but his voice was steady. Mental health is just as important as physical health, he began. We need to stop treating it like something that should only be addressed in crisis situations. It should be woven into every part of our lives, just like any other aspect of our health. If we want to see long-term changes in society, we need to start by equipping people with the tools to manage their mental well-being on a daily basis. He spoke passionately about his own struggles, about being homeless, about his journey through the military, and about how he had fought for his life every day. He spoke not just as a businessman, but as a human being who had lived through the pain and come out stronger. It was a powerful moment. After his testimony, Michael received an outpouring of support from both lawmakers and the public. People were moved by his honesty, and many recognized the importance of the work he was doing. In the weeks that followed, they were able to secure funding for the initiative, and it began to gain momentum. With their national initiative gaining traction, Michael and Luke focused on building even more strategic partnerships. They worked with top healthcare providers to ensure that the initiative was not just about education but also about providing real, tangible resources for those who needed them. They reached out to tech companies to create mental health apps that could provide access to therapy, stress relief exercises, and other tools for self-care. In addition, they started working with well-known influencers in the mental health space, people like Brené Brown and Dr. Nedra Glover Tawwab, to help spread the message and normalize mental health conversations in everyday life. They launched social media campaigns that showcased real stories from people who had benefited from prioritizing their mental health. Soon, their initiative began to reach people across the country. Schools were implementing mental health curriculums. Businesses were offering wellness programs to their employees, and the general public was engaging in open, honest conversations about mental well-being. As the initiative gained momentum, the ripple effect became evident. People began to open up about their struggles, sharing their own mental health journeys and supporting one another. It wasn't just about businesses or schools anymore. It was a national movement to change the way people viewed mental health, to make it something that could be talked about without shame or fear. For Michael and Luke, the impact was overwhelming. They saw firsthand the difference they were making in people's lives, whether it was a teenager who had struggled with anxiety but had learned how to manage it through their resources, or a veteran who had found the support he needed to heal from the trauma of war. As the initiative continued to grow, Michael and Luke realized that their work was only just beginning. They had made incredible strides, but the journey toward a healthier, more mentally resilient society would take time. They were prepared for the long haul, knowing that every step they took brought them closer to their goal. Sitting in their office, reflecting on everything they had accomplished, Michael and Luke shared a quiet moment of gratitude. Their business had transformed into something much larger than they could have ever imagined. What had started as a small idea to help people in the workplace had become a national movement, a movement that would continue to change lives for generations to come. And as they looked ahead, they knew that their legacy would be one of healing, not just for individuals, but for communities and society as a whole. They had started with nothing, but now they had something far more valuable. A future where mental health was a priority and where people could live their lives with the tools and support they needed to thrive. The journey was far from over, but Michael and Luke were ready, and they knew that together they could continue to make a difference, one life at a time. Michael and Luke had transformed their vision into a national initiative, but as the movement gained momentum, they began to see that the need for mental health support wasn't just confined to the United States. It was a global issue, one that transcended borders, cultures, and languages. Everywhere they went, people were struggling with mental health, whether it was the pressures of work, the challenges of family life, or the scars left by trauma and war. "I can't shake the feeling that we've only scratched the surface," Michael said one evening as he and Luke sat in their office overlooking the city. "We've made a huge impact here, but what about the rest of the world? What about the millions of people out there who need what we've created?" Luke leaned forward, tapping his fingers thoughtfully on the desk. "You're right. We've been focused on the U.S., but mental health is a global crisis. Think about the veterans in countries around the world, the children in conflict zones, the people in developing nations who don't even have basic access to mental health resources. What if we could bring our model to them?" It was a powerful thought, one that sparked a sense of urgency in both of them. They realized that the work they had started could be a blueprint for change on a global scale. But to take their initiative to the next level, they would need international partnerships, funding, and political backing. They would also need to adapt their programs to different cultural contexts. What worked in one country might not work in another. The idea of expanding internationally was exciting, but it also came with challenges. Michael and Luke knew that to reach a global audience, they would need to collaborate with organizations that already had a presence in other countries. They began to reach out to international nonprofits, mental health experts, and global leaders to build partnerships that would help them bring their message to the world. Their first step was to attend an international mental health conference in Geneva, Switzerland. It was there that they had the opportunity to network with leaders in the field, including representatives from the World Health Organization, WHO, the United Nations, and various global mental health organizations. As Michael stood on the stage in front of a packed auditorium, he felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. This was his chance to take their work global, to show the world that mental health was not just a personal issue, but a societal one that needed attention. "I've seen firsthand how mental health can shape a person's life," Michael said, his voice steady. "I've seen the impact of trauma, of neglect, of the lack of support. But I've also seen the healing power of mental health care, the power to transform lives, to restore hope, and to create a better future." The audience was silent as he spoke, and when he finished, there was a round of applause. It was clear that his message resonated with people from all walks of life. In the days that followed, Michael and Luke met with various stakeholders who were eager to collaborate and help bring their vision to other countries. With the foundation of their global expansion in place, Michael and Luke began to tailor their programs to meet the needs of different countries. They worked with local mental health experts to develop culturally relevant materials and approaches that would resonate with people in diverse regions. One of the first countries they expanded to was the United Kingdom. In partnership with the National Health Service, NHS, they introduced mental health programs in schools and workplaces across the country. The program was met with overwhelming support, and it quickly became clear that the need for mental health services was just as critical in the UK as it had been in the US. Next, they set their sights on countries in Africa, where mental health care was often underfunded or overlooked entirely. In partnership with local organizations, they began offering mental health training for healthcare professionals and creating community-based mental health programs in rural areas. They also launched a mobile app that provided access to therapy and resources for people in underserved areas. The impact was profound. In Uganda, for example, a young man named James had been struggling with depression after losing his family in a car accident. He had no access to therapy, and his community didn't understand his pain. But when he was introduced to the mental health resources through Michael and Luke's initiative, he found a therapist who helped him navigate his grief. Slowly but surely, James began to heal. James' story was just one of many that were unfolding around the world as the initiative spread. And with each success, Michael and Luke felt more determined to continue their mission. Of course, expanding their initiative internationally wasn't without its challenges. Different countries had varying levels of acceptance when it came to mental health, and in some places, there was still significant stigma attached to seeking help. In certain regions, mental health care was seen as a luxury, something that only the wealthy could afford, while in others, it was considered a taboo topic that people avoided talking about. One of the toughest challenges came when they tried to launch their program in the Middle East. Cultural norms and religious beliefs made mental health a difficult topic to address, and many local governments were resistant to foreign organizations coming in to change the status quo. Michael and Luke knew that they couldn't force change. They had to approach the issue with sensitivity and respect. They worked closely with local leaders and influencers to better understand the cultural nuances and adapt their programs to fit the local context. It wasn't easy, but over time, they began to build trust with communities, and slowly but surely, the conversation around mental health began to shift. As the years passed, Michael and Luke's initiative grew into a global movement. They had reached millions of people in dozens of countries, providing resources, education, and support to those in need. They had created a network of mental health professionals, volunteers, and advocates who were working together to break down the barriers surrounding mental health and build a more supportive world for everyone. But as they stood on the global stage, looking at the progress they had made, Michael and Luke knew that their work wasn't done. There were still billions of people who had yet to be reached, billions of lives that could be transformed by the work they were doing. And so, they continued to dream big, pushing the boundaries of what was possible, always with the goal of making mental health a global priority. They had started with one small wish on Veterans Day, but now, they had a vision for a world where no one had to suffer in silence, where mental health was no longer an afterthought, but a fundamental part of the human experience. They had come so far, but the journey was only just beginning. As the global mental health initiative continued to spread, Michael and Luke were often amazed at the unforeseen impact they were having. Their mission to break the stigma around mental health and make it a worldwide priority had sparked conversations in homes, schools, and workplaces around the globe. But there was more to it than just the ripple effect they had anticipated. They were witnessing an undeniable shift in society, a transformation that was happening in real time, and they were at the forefront of it all. In places where mental health had been dismissed, ignored, or stigmatized, people were now standing up and speaking out. The conversations were becoming more open, less afraid of judgment. Schools were adopting mental health education programs as part of their core curriculum, businesses were offering mental health days as part of their employee wellness programs, and community groups were holding open discussions about mental health struggles. Michael received a message one evening from a woman named Maria, a teacher in Mexico City. She wrote about how her school had started implementing the foundation's mental health programs and how it had changed her students' lives. She shared a story about one of her students, Carlos, a 15-year-old boy who had been withdrawn and struggling with depression. Thanks to the program, Carlos had found the courage to reach out for help, and with the support of a counselor, he was starting to make progress. Stories like this are happening all over the world, Michael told Luke one day as they read through the messages pouring in from people they had never met. It's incredible to see that what we've built isn't just about providing resources. It's about changing the very way people view mental health. Luke nodded thoughtfully. We've shifted the conversation. It's no longer about whether people deserve help. It's about giving everyone the tools to thrive, no matter where they are in life. But as the movement grew, Michael and Luke realized that with their success came a greater responsibility. The need was still so great, and there were still areas in the world where access to mental health resources was limited. The challenges they faced now were different, but no less significant. Their mission had expanded far beyond anything they had ever imagined, and the stakes were higher than ever. As they expanded their efforts, Michael and Luke came to a sobering realization. While they had made substantial progress, the reality was that mental health care in many parts of the world remained an afterthought. In low-income countries, healthcare systems were overburdened, and mental health was often relegated to the back burner. In some regions, mental health professionals were few and far between, and there were simply not enough resources to meet the overwhelming demand. Michael, Luke said, his voice tinged with concern one morning as they met to discuss the next phase of their plan. We've done a lot, but there's still so much more to do. There are millions of people who still don't have access to even the basic mental health resources. We need to think bigger, much bigger. Michael was silent for a moment, considering Luke's words. He knew Luke was right. The foundation had reached a critical point, and they needed to adapt their approach to ensure that their efforts would continue to have a lasting impact. We need to tackle this on a larger scale, Michael said, his tone firm. We need to partner with governments, NGOs, and private companies to bring mental health resources directly to the people who need them most. If we want to reach those who are most vulnerable, we need to meet them where they are. One of the most pressing challenges that Michael and Luke identified was the mental health crisis in refugee camps. Millions of people around the world had been displaced by conflict, natural disasters, and economic hardship. Many of these individuals had experienced extreme trauma, loss of family, violence, and the constant threat of danger. Yet, despite their immense need, access to mental health care in refugee camps was often non-existent. During a trip to Jordan, where they visited a refugee camp for Syrians displaced by civil war, Michael and Luke saw firsthand the devastating toll that trauma was taking on the people there. Families lived in overcrowded conditions, and the children played in dusty streets, their laughter masking the deep emotional scars they carried. In one of the camp's makeshift clinics, Michael met a young mother named Amina. She had lost her husband in the war and had fled Syria with her 2 children in search of safety. Amina was visibly exhausted, not just from the physical strain of her journey, but from the weight of her grief and anxiety. She explained that her children were also struggling but had nowhere to turn for help. "We've lost everything," she said, her voice cracking. "How can we heal when there is no place to go? No one to help us?" Michael's heart ached as he listened to her. He knew that Amina's story was not unique. The refugees they spoke with had experienced unimaginable loss and trauma, and many were left to cope without proper mental health support. "We have to do something about this," Michael said to Luke, as they stood outside the clinic, watching the children play. "We can't just offer resources to people who already have access. We need to go into the places where the need is greatest. We need to bring mental health care to the people who are suffering the most." Determined to take action, Michael and Luke worked tirelessly to develop a plan to bring mental health care to refugee camps around the world. They partnered with international relief organizations like the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, and local NGOs to create mental health outreach programs in refugee camps. They provided training for mental health professionals to work in these environments and launched mobile clinics that could reach remote areas where traditional services were unavailable. They also focused on creating culturally sensitive programs that addressed the unique needs of displaced populations. Trauma-informed care became a cornerstone of their approach, ensuring that those who had experienced severe hardship received the appropriate support to begin their healing journey. Their efforts in the refugee camps were groundbreaking. The mobile clinics were able to provide therapy, crisis counseling, and support to thousands of individuals. In Jordan, they worked with Amina and her children, offering them the resources they needed to begin healing from their trauma. Over time, Amina found some peace, and her children started to show signs of emotional recovery. For Michael and Luke, this was a turning point in their global mission. The work they had done in refugee camps was some of the most rewarding of their careers. It was proof that their vision could make a difference even in the most dire circumstances. As their international work continued to grow, Michael and Luke's efforts to address the mental health crisis became more urgent than ever. But they remained hopeful. The more they saw the impact of their work, the more they realized that they were part of something much larger than themselves. They had started with a single wish, a wish that had sparked a movement of change. They had faced enormous challenges, but their determination and vision had driven them to create a worldwide network of support and healing. Looking ahead, Michael and Luke knew that the journey was far from over. The mental health crisis was vast, and there would always be new challenges to overcome. But they were no longer just two men with a dream. They were leaders of a global movement, one that would continue to heal, to transform, and to give hope to those who needed it most. And with that, Michael and Luke embraced their mission, knowing that their legacy would live on in the millions of lives they had touched, and in the countless others who would continue to benefit from the healing power of mental health care for years to come. As Michael and Luke's movement continued to gain ground globally, they found themselves at a tipping point. What had started as a mission to bring mental health awareness and resources to veterans had snowballed into something much larger, something that was changing the global landscape of mental health care. But with success came immense pressure. They were now dealing with international governments, large corporations, and organizations with their own agendas and priorities. Michael and Luke knew they had to stay true to their mission, but they also realized that the bigger the movement became, the more complex the dynamics would be. One morning, as they sat in their conference room, Luke leaned back in his chair, looking over a stack of papers. "This is getting bigger than we thought," he said, his voice tinged with concern. "We've got partnerships with the UN, World Health Organization, and so many private companies that it's starting to feel like we're juggling too much." Michael nodded, rubbing his temples. "I know what you mean. We're being pulled in so many directions. The movement is growing, but we have to make sure we don't lose sight of why we started this in the first place, to help people." Luke looked at him seriously. "We need to ask ourselves if we're still able to stay authentic. Are we still making decisions based on what's best for the people who need our help, or are we just chasing bigger numbers and more influence?" The question lingered in the air. Michael had always believed that the core of their mission was to serve those who were suffering. But now, as their movement became more global, it felt like they were constantly battling between the pursuit of influence and maintaining the purity of their cause. The struggle between maintaining the integrity of their mission and expanding their influence came to a head during an international summit in Paris. Michael and Luke had been invited to speak alongside global leaders in the mental health field, and they were eager to make a powerful impact. However, as the summit unfolded, they found themselves at odds with some of the organizations they had partnered with. During a panel discussion, a representative from a major pharmaceutical company stood up and began speaking about the importance of prescribing medication as the first line of treatment for mental health conditions. The idea of pushing medication as the sole solution to mental health problems sat uncomfortably with Michael, who had always believed in a holistic approach, one that included therapy, support groups, and community-based care. When the representative finished, Michael couldn't help but raise his hand. "I understand that medication plays a role in mental health treatment, but we cannot overlook the importance of therapy and community support," he said, his voice steady but firm. "We cannot simply medicate our way out of a mental health crisis. People need to feel heard, understood, and supported, without being stigmatized or dismissed." The room fell silent. Some of the attendees nodded in agreement, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Luke could feel the tension building, and he knew they had crossed a line that would have repercussions. After the panel ended, Michael and Luke found themselves surrounded by representatives from various organizations, some of whom were eager to discuss their differing views. One of them, a high-ranking official from a government health agency, approached them. "We appreciate your passion for a holistic approach, but you're going to have to make a choice," the official said, his tone more conciliatory than confrontational. "If you want to continue to partner with us, you'll need to align more closely with the pharmaceutical interests. The reality is that without medication, we're not going to make any real progress in addressing the global mental health crisis. Michael and Luke exchanged a glance. They knew that this was a pivotal moment, a moment where they would need to make a choice that would shape the future of their initiative. We're not interested in aligning with one industry or another, Michael said firmly. We're here to help people. If we have to compromise that mission to gain support, then we'd rather walk away. As the summit ended and the team returned to their headquarters in the U.S., Michael and Luke spent hours discussing their next steps. The decision they had made in Paris was bold, but it felt right. They had always prioritized people over profits, and they knew that their mission was never about aligning with a particular industry or agenda. It was about providing comprehensive, holistic care for those who needed it most. But there was another realization they had come to during the summit, one that would drive their next phase of growth. They had spent so much time expanding their reach and building partnerships with organizations that had their own interests that they had neglected an important component of their movement: the people who had benefited from their programs. They needed to bring the voices of those they were helping to the forefront. The people whose lives had been transformed by their mental health programs needed to be the advocates, the messengers, the champions of the cause. It was time for the people who had been healed to stand up and tell their stories. Michael and Luke had always believed that stories had the power to change the world, but now they understood that these stories were not just inspirational. They were the truth. These were the stories that could cut through the noise, challenge preconceived notions, and inspire others to take action. The decision was made. They would begin an international campaign centered around real stories from real people, people who had faced incredible adversity, whether it was mental illness, trauma, or simply the struggles of everyday life, and had found hope and healing through the programs Michael and Luke had helped create. They began reaching out to individuals from every corner of the globe. Stories poured in from refugees in the Middle East, from children in South America, from soldiers in Europe, and from families in Asia. The common thread was clear. No matter where they came from, people needed to know that mental health support was available, that they were not alone, and that healing was possible. As they put together a global campaign called The Healing Journey, they showcased these stories through social media, documentaries, and interviews. They used every platform available to share the personal accounts of the people whose lives had been transformed by mental health care. And as these stories spread, so did the movement. One story that particularly stood out was that of Sophie, a young woman from a rural village in Kenya. She had grown up with little access to mental health resources, and her depression had gone unnoticed for years. But when she was introduced to a mental health program through the initiative, her life changed. Sophie became a powerful advocate, traveling across her country to speak about the importance of mental health care. Her words, filled with raw emotion, resonated deeply with people in Kenya and beyond. As her story went viral, more and more people came forward to share their experiences, and soon, Sophie was invited to speak at global conferences, her voice echoing in rooms filled with world leaders, policymakers, and advocates. As Michael and Luke watched the movement take shape, they were overwhelmed with pride. It was no longer just their initiative. It was a global movement, powered by the stories of the people who had been transformed by mental health care. And this movement was growing stronger every day. They realized that the tipping point they had reached wasn't just about expanding their reach or increasing their influence. It was about empowering others to share their voices, to take ownership of the cause, and to create a world where mental health was seen as essential to human well-being. Together, they had ignited a fire that burned bright across the globe, one story at a time. The movement wasn't just about the work they had done. It was about the change they had sparked and the change that would continue for generations to come. The momentum of Michael and Luke's global initiative continued to build, and as they looked back on everything they had accomplished, they realized they had created something far beyond their wildest expectations. It was not just a movement, but a legacy, a lasting change in the way the world approached mental health. They had taken on the enormous challenge of shifting perceptions, breaking down the stigma surrounding mental health, and advocating for a system of care that went beyond traditional treatments. They had used stories, not statistics, to show the world that healing was possible, and that no one, no matter their background or circumstances, should face their struggles alone. But as with any story, there were new chapters to be written. Michael and Luke knew they couldn't stop now. Their success had opened doors to even more opportunities, and with each opportunity came new responsibilities. The movement needed to grow, adapt, and evolve, so they could continue helping people who were still suffering in silence. Together with their team, Michael and Luke had built a network of mental health professionals, advocates, and supporters across the world. They had created platforms where people could come together, share their stories, and access the help they so desperately needed. But what became clear in the months that followed the success of the global campaign was that there were still so many challenges ahead. Access to mental health resources in rural areas, for instance, remained a significant issue. The stigma surrounding mental illness was deeply rooted in many cultures, and even though they had made tremendous progress, the battle was far from over. One of the biggest obstacles they had to face was political. Governments in some parts of the world still treated mental health as a secondary concern, pushing it down the list of priorities in favor of economic growth or military spending. Michael and Luke knew they had to keep pushing for policy changes, using their influence to ensure mental health was recognized as a fundamental human right. One evening, as the world moved around them, Michael and Luke found themselves sitting in a quiet park in the heart of New York City. The bright lights of Times Square blinked in the distance, but here, in this peaceful space, they could reflect on the journey they had taken. "It's incredible how far we've come," Luke said, breaking the silence. "I remember when we were just two guys in a room, trying to figure out what to do next. Now, we're changing the world." Michael looked around the park, the rustling of leaves in the cool night air providing a calming backdrop. "I know," he said, "but I can't help but think about the people we still haven't reached. There's so much more to do. Every day, people are suffering, and if we stop now, we're letting them down." Luke nodded in agreement. "That's the thing about this journey. It never ends. There will always be more people to help, more stories to share, more change to create. But if we keep pushing forward, if we keep believing in what we're doing, we can make this world a better place. And I believe we will." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the future pressing on them. But there was also a sense of hope. Hope that no matter how big the challenge, they had the power to overcome it. In the years that followed, Michael and Luke's initiative expanded into new territories, reaching even more people with their message of hope, healing, and change. They continued to push for policy reforms, ensuring that mental health care became an integral part of every healthcare system around the world. But their work didn't stop at advocacy. They began to develop innovative programs to help those in need, programs that went beyond therapy and medication, programs that addressed the underlying causes of mental illness, such as trauma, poverty, and social isolation. They also focused on prevention, working with schools and communities to educate people about mental health before the crisis point hit. Their programs were designed to teach resilience, coping skills, and emotional intelligence, giving people the tools they needed to take care of their mental well-being. As the years went on, Michael and Luke's names became synonymous with mental health advocacy. They had built a network of allies, individuals, organizations, and governments, who shared their vision of a world where mental health was no longer stigmatized but celebrated as an essential part of human well-being. The impact of Michael and Luke's work could be seen everywhere. From rural villages to bustling cities, from schools to workplaces, people were talking about mental health in ways they never had before. The world had changed, and it was changing because of the people who had been inspired by Michael and Luke's work. One of the most powerful effects of their initiative was the ripple effect it created. The people whose lives had been touched by their programs became advocates themselves, spreading the message to others and inspiring even more people to take action. As Michael and Luke traveled the world, speaking at conferences and meeting with world leaders, they often received letters and messages from people who had been inspired by their story. These messages, filled with gratitude and hope, were a constant reminder of why they had started their journey in the first place. One letter, in particular, stood out. It was from a young veteran named Sam, who had been homeless and struggling with severe PTSD when he had first come across their initiative. He wrote, "I was lost, living on the streets, and I didn't think there was any hope for me. But when I found your programs, something inside me shifted. You gave me the tools to heal, and most importantly, you gave me a reason to live again. I'll never be able to repay you, but I want you to know that you've saved my life." I'm now helping others who are in the same place I was. Thank you for everything." Reading that letter, Michael and Luke knew they had done something extraordinary. They had not only changed Sam's life, they had changed the lives of countless others like him. Years later, after countless victories, challenges, and moments of doubt, Michael and Luke found themselves back at the park in New York City where they had once sat, reflecting on their journey. The world was different now, better, more connected, more compassionate, and they knew that the legacy they had built was not just theirs, but everyone who had ever shared their story, who had ever been touched by their work. As they sat there, reflecting on the full circle they had come, Michael looked at Luke and smiled. "We did it, didn't we?" Luke chuckled. "We did. And we're not done yet. The journey continues." The legacy of their work would continue for generations to come, a testament to the power of compassion, community, and the unwavering belief that every life matters. And as the sun set behind them, casting a warm glow over the city, Michael and Luke knew that they had changed the world. Not with grand gestures or flashy campaigns, but with the simple, profound power of one person's story and the ripple effect it had on the lives of millions. Their journey had been long, but it had been worth every step.